Trading insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Welcome to a brand new week. Good morning and welcome to the Situation Room. This is the only way to start your day. It's also Kenya's biggest conversation. It's Monday, the 28th of October, 2019, and we have Nduoko. Good morning.
Good morning, Eric. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
How was the weekend?
The weekend was good.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it wasn't restful as per se, but it was good. It came and went.
Good to see you, Eric.
Good to see you too. Did you participate in the Standard Chartered Marathon yesterday?
In my mind, yes, I did.
You supported.
Yes, it's mental support.
You supported the idea.
It's also important.
You watched it as well.
Voila, you got it.
That's it. That's good enough support. Something I did. I had a few people who I was cheering on. One of them finished at 5 kilometers. The other one finished at 10 kilometers. Of course, my people don't do 42.
Your people.
My people don't do 42. That is left to other people. City Muga.
Yes, good morning, Eric.
Good morning, City.
Yes.
How was it weekend for you?
Quiet.
It was a quiet one.
My weekends tend to be quiet, actually. I purpose that they are quiet.
It's time to rest.
Yes, and to rejuvenate and to rethink and to charge my battery so that by the time we get to Monday, I have energy. You don't want to start a Monday tired. That whole week will be very long,
True.
very tedious, and people will be unnecessarily annoying. Everything will be gloomy.
You have everything basically working against you.
Yes,
the entire week.
The entire week will be unpleasant, and it's something you can actually mitigate against. It doesn't have to be that way.
True.
Yes.
It was a busy weekend for the Kibra by-election candidates, especially yesterday. We saw big rallies. ODM had their big rally. Jubilee as well had their big rally. And the big guns also came out. Raila Odinga was there campaigning for Imran Okoth, ODM. And of course, Deputy President William Ruto was there to campaign for McDonald Mariga of Jubilee. Kibra will never remain a hotbed of violence, a slum, a place synonymous with poverty. That's what DP Ruto said.
What did he mean?
He meant that's what it is right now. But it's going to change.
I see.
When they elect a new leader by the name of
over what period of time?
I don't know his timelines, but that's it.
Well, we also saw a lot of promises coming out from DP Ruto this weekend and said that, if you vote in McDonald Mariga, we promise you an educational institution. I believe it was at a polytechnic level. We promise you that. We promise you better roads. We promise you amenities, electricity, water. And I'm thinking, my goodness, isn't this what the people are owed anyway?
Is that the job
he pegged these promises or this establishment of these amenities on the election of Mariga. It said this is basically telling the people this is the way to get these things. Elect Mariga, you get the things that you should otherwise have as normal.
Because if you think about it, I mean, the job of an MP is not basically to build polytechnics. That's the job of the national government. And this is the head of the national government.
Just look at the government and look at the bodies the government have who have direct functions to perform those very things he's saying.
Yes.
That's their job.
That's their
job. That's what you should do anyway.
And more importantly, they know about those things better than any politician does.
Of course.
They have the details, they have the data.
He should have answered why it hasn't happened. He should have actually started by saying, this hasn't happened because of VCD.
But Eric, think about it. Would it not have been an even better strategy if they had actually done something and said, folks, this is what we've done in the last 2 years. Okay? We've done this, we've done this. And our grand plan is to continue along those same lines and to achieve A, B, C, D.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you have a leg to stand on. Because exactly,
Yes.
they've done this, it hadn't been done before.
Yes.
And now they're saying they're going to do more. There's reason not to believe them and to say, actually, since they've done this, there's no reason why. But you want to start with a clean slate and say, we're going to do this. Why did he stop at Polytechnic? Why didn't he just say he's going to build a university?
But these are the promises that politicians make. So also Raila Odinga said, we have a blueprint to develop Kibra and we will achieve it.
You see, his speech writers, again, like the strategies I was saying, Ruto strategies should be sacked. His speech writers should also be sacked.
Whose?
Raila's.
Raila's speech writers.
Yes. He has been in power long enough, and there are projects that the government has carried out in that area that all he needs to do is take credit for, because some of them happened under his watch. And those are things people know and they have seen.
And he can claim credit.
He can
for
claim.
that.
He can say, I was even MP of this area. I'm the one who did this.
So he says, yes, he says that he managed to redeem Kibra from the shackles of land grabbing, high rents, electricity and water problems while in charge of the area, while also bringing in slum upgrading program. So he says, you see, when I was MP here, these are the things that I did.
No, that rent thing, he needs to go slow on, because what he introduced was something that actually spelled doom for very many landowners and many people who actually owned property.
What did he introduce?
Remember this political statement he made about people not paying rent?
Oh, yes.
It had very dire consequences for a long, long time. And
landlords.
it helped perpetuate the myth that if this man becomes president, we're going to have a problem, because this is how he thinks. Yes. And someone who's a landlord, with the exception of serious political leaders who had been councillors and so forth in those areas, okay, most of the landlords in those areas are simple people. They're not well-to-do. They're not tycoons. They're not barons as such. So and that rent is where they derive their livelihood. So if you tell people not to pay because of political disagreements,
you're removing food from someone's mouth, essentially.
No, you guaranteed poverty. You've taken them to penury. You've actually taken them to poverty, a place where they believe they had come from. Now, those aren't people who are going to forgive you in a hurry.
Or forget what you did.
Yes. Even when things go back to normal, they will not.
They won't.
Yes.
The Nation has been running a series of articles. It appears that they are looking into Uhuru's inner circle. Remember last week they had this one on the people who are actually running State House?
Yes.
It had names. Now today they're saying who's who in Uhuru's inner circle of power. Insiders say President Kenyatta has reduced his lineup to a handful of people entrusted with specific roles to help him run the country in his last term in office. So they have pictures here. They've got Major General Philip Kameru, the Director of National Intelligence. You've got Fred Matiang'i. You don't need to introduce him. Samson Modede is the General, the Chief of Defense Forces. Raila Odinga is my brother, the handshake. Joseph Kinyua is the head of public service. Karanja Kibicho is Matiang'i's PS. Nancy Gitau is a political strategist. Kennedy Mbogua is a State House Controller. Those are the people that the Daily Nation is telling us are inner circle. If you look at them, Kameru, military. Kennedy Mbogua, security. Samson Modede, security. Fred Matiang'i and Karanja Kibicho in charge of national security.
What is Kibicho's background?
Dr. Kibicho is actually an engineer.
And Dr. Matiang'i?
Dr. Matiang'i is, I don't remember, but I don't remember.
What did you say, IT or something?
Something like that.
Something technology.
Something technology, yeah.
Actually, but why is it that they don't mention? Because there are people who work under those permanent secretaries who nobody ever hears of. And they are the real powers, if you ask me.
They push.
Because they never go anywhere.
No, they don't.
They stay there.
I'm surprised they mentioned Nancy Gitau, but they never go anywhere. And if you don't know them, you don't know them. PSs come and go. These fellows don't go anywhere.
The folks who run the machine have seemed to almost have like a permanent position,
but that's
in terms of how things are done.
That's how it ought to be. Why do you think they're called civil servants? It shouldn't matter who's in power.
They run the machinery.
They run it.
Yes.
They do quite a bit.
Yes.
And Nancy Gitau, political strategist par excellence. Gitau is known for her organizational skills and was a key element during the Jubilee campaigns. Initially based at State House and the office of the president, Ms. Gitau had quietly left, but insiders say that she's still one of the few people outside the government who are normally consulted She still runs the political affairs of Mr. Kenyatta, despite her shadowy input. At the moment, she is said to be closely involved in the president's 2022 political decisions and plans. Remember, she was also the same political advisor during the Mwai Kibaki 10 years. So she's done that now, 10 plus 7, 17 years, being really, really close to State House. This is power.
Why did they mention Kenywa?
Joseph Kenywa, he's the head of public service. He's there.
You know, when someone stays in a job that long, it reminds me of Amos Wako when he was AG. I mean, that guy was AG forever.
The eternal attorney
For an
general.
entire generation.
Yes, forever.
Imagine.
He was, you started comparing with people like Kenyatta, okay?
Yeah.
Someone who you didn't know what he looked like, but you knew. In fact,
You knew those Kenyatta.
then you knew there was Kenyatta, you just didn't know what he looked like. And every picture they showed you of Kenyatta, it was probably when he was 15.
It was an old grainy photo.
I'm joking.
CT. All right. No walk-in patients at the 8.8 billion Kenyatta University Hospital. The Chinese-built hospital to finally open its doors following presidential intervention. So, Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital opened its doors today for patients as it awaits the official launch by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Health Cabinet Secretary Cicely Kariuki confirmed the hospital's opening, saying that she's satisfied that the facility is now ready to serve patients. It was constructed through a loan from the Chinese, and it was to be opened in August, but it was pushed back to lack of adequate staff. It's interesting. They could not find anyone to hire. Did we hear recently that there was actually...
repeat it again?
They couldn't find anyone to hire
For what?
to work in the hospital.
Is it that they couldn't find anyone to hire or they didn't have money to hire?
Well, they had the money. It was not about the money.
Look, we have people who graduated as doctors, nurses,
This is
lab
what I'm saying,
technicians
and don't have jobs.
And you're telling me they couldn't hire.
KU Referral Hospital is telling you this.
It's under KU, isn't it?
It is. It is.
And it's under that vice chancellor who was under siege not very long ago.
Olive Mugenda.
No, Olive left.
The new one.
She left, but now she's actually
She's
the
the
hospital's
chair.
board chair. Olive Mugenda is now the chair of the hospital's board, and it was concluded that it was okay. Now, Karaoke toured the facility over the weekend with the hospital's board chair and concluded that it now has the necessary staff to go ahead and open. 2 months ago, they did not.
If you say they didn't have the necessary staff, that I would understand.
Okay. So she's been assured that they'll open on Monday. 650-bed capacity hospital. At some point was shrouded by controversy, and it forced the National Assembly Health Committee to intervene. And so the committee directed the National Treasury to bail out the hospital from the Chinese loan and provide it with 1.06 billion shillings to kickstart operations. So there was the issue of, having to pay the Chinese back.
There was a lot of
and
back
then
and forth on that
I mean,
hospital.
it's just...
First of all, Kenyatta University itself claimed ownership of the hospital. And then there was the whole issue of who runs it. It took the president to sign a presidential order, actually making that hospital a state corporation. And that's how now it's being run. That's why you're seeing the CS going there, because it's now a state corporation.
But then it's clear that this is just a referral hospital. It's not a walk-in, walk-out facility. So don't expect people to rush in as the doors open today. There's enough sensitization and no one is left in doubt and should think that they can walk in here with a flu or some other ailment, according to CS Karaoke.
Wish them the best of luck in actually containing that and managing that. Jerry, good morning.
Good morning.
What's on the Star?
I'm looking at the Star, highly political. Duale BBI jab kicks up storm in Mount Kenya. So Moses Kuria terms Garissa MP's tirade against Central a facade, which I thought when I saw. And this is Duale talking to Central about the BBI. It says here the National Assembly Majority Leader Aden Duale has told Mount Kenya MPs off over their hard stance on a possible shift from the current presidential to parliamentary system of governance. So there's this narrative being woven that Central is actually against what is deemed to be the most important aspect of the BBI, which is the structural readjustment in government structures, i.e. moving from the presidential system to the parliamentary one. And this is in a statement to newsrooms yesterday. The Garissa Township MP said Central Kenya region does not have a monopoly on the presidency. His remarks come hardly a week after Mount Kenya MPs announced that the region will reject the Building Bridges Initiative Task Force report recommending a parliamentary system of government. I don't know how much politicking there is in this, but I gather there's some layers to it. There's been rumors that Mount Kenya will be rejecting a BBI. Until they do so, and there's really no hard evidence that they will. Apparently, the parliamentary system would apparently work against the Kikuyus. Would be interesting to see how this works.
The MPs did a press conference the other day.
40 of them.
Rejecting
40
it.
MPs. Arguing against the
And they're doing it in beds.
And they can do one accepting it as well. It just depends who the highest bidder is on the day and how much they're being paid. Of course, there is the sort of suggestion that given that this would be based on constituencies, it sort of levels up the playing field in as far as, the different regions are concerned, because the Parliament or Prime Minister is based on the number of MPs. So you start to see that some regions have quite a number of constituencies, and this doesn't bode well apparently for Central. This is the sort of narrative that's being kicked out there, but let's see what happens.
Let me ask a different question, if I may.
Please do.
Do you have a situation, what is the situation we have do we know of MPs in Central who are actually powerful enough to control votes?
To control votes?
Yes, meaning individuals who, it doesn't matter what the president thinks, this is an individual who can actually get elected. Do they exist?
Are they independent ones? Perhaps.
Strong.
Strong
who would come out as a powerful politician?
More powerful than the president?
No, not
Nobody.
more powerful. Powerful in his own little enclave.
Powerful enough to influence votes.
Votes in his own enclave. Meaning the sort of person who people say, you need to talk to so-and-so.
I think in terms of something as important as a referendum, they would vote as if they were voting for the president. It's a national agenda as opposed to a constituency one. So you would find they actually listen to what the president says on something like this. I think his comments would overshadow any of those MPs, to be honest.
You see why I asked this question? I was in Central Kenya sometimes on Friday.
Right, whereabouts?
I was in Karatina.
Right.
Yes. And I was talking to people I know, people I've known for a long time, but who come from there. And they were telling me that they're seeing interesting moves and changes. And I said, okay, in what form? I said, is it what people are saying, or is it what they're doing? He said, the things they're saying. So I held my peace, because these are Kenyans they were speaking about. And Kenyans know the value of speech. And they also know who they're speaking to. So they'll tailor what they're saying to whoever the audience is. Yes.
Of course, between different qua ground.
Yes, between different
qua ground, between different. So let's see how it goes. If the BBI report doesn't come out today, then we'll see when it does come out, because the president is scheduled to be traveling, I think, out of the country tomorrow. So today is likely to be. Remember, you can download the Standard e-paper app from Google Play Store and Apple App Store. Good morning. It's 18 minutes after 6.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM,
in the
Nairobi.
Situation Room, this is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's 19 minutes after 6 o'clock. Good morning. This is a bright and early Monday. At least today, it's not raining in Nairobi. It's not one of those kind of mornings in Nairobi. Broadcasting on 94.4 in Nairobi, 87.9 in Mombasa, 102.5 Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, 90.9 Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. And of course, we are live streaming, as we always do every morning on Facebook, Spice FM KE, on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke, plus also on our YouTube channel, that's Spice FM KE, our hashtag on Twitter, The Situation Room, our Twitter handle, Spice FM KE. In the room, my name is Eric Latif. We have Jerry Thorne, Nduoko, and CT Muga. Let's talk about state corporations, CTO. Is it investment of states in some of these? They're called monopolies. Let's just go there. For example, Kenya Ports Authority.
Yes.
Fully owned and managed and run by the government.
Yes.
Kenya Pipeline Corporation, fully owned and managed and bringing government some income. State monopoly.
Actually, the one has to be clear whether you're talking about state corporations, for which were created under very specific acts, or parastatals, or institutions where government has shares, sometimes a majority, and majority probably as in individual majority group, not as in they own the bulk of it. We've got to differentiate these things. But I'm going to let's just talk about state participation, and where the participation is it's predominant. There's nobody else that sort of like shares that gravy train with them. The unfortunate thing about the discussions we have about state corporations and the things that the state does, if you go by what we read and what has happened in the recent past, it's negative. So we cast a negative eye on it, and we forget that there were not noble but very practical reasons why these corporations or these parastatals, or why the government decided to buy into certain enterprises. And for the longest time, many of these corporations, many of these entities, let me call them entities, actually worked and they achieved the purpose for which it was intended. They actually did, because essentially they were to benefit the country. They were to benefit. The government understood that if they didn't have a commercial understanding of certain things and participated or utilized the institution as a business machinery, then they wouldn't benefit, because the function of state really is not to do business. Now, one of the biggest corporations that this government ever set up was something called ICDC. That's Industrial and Industrial, Commercial and Development Corporation. It was set up specifically to be the arm of government that invests in businesses. That was their job. Many people know of Uchumi, but they don't know Uchumi was part and parcel of ICDC. People have heard of something called Kenyatta. They don't know it was part and parcel. Beach hotels, buildings that are within town, many businesses, Kenya National Trading Corporation, they're all under ICDC. Now, you may think this is strange, but you've heard people talk about Singapore, Malaysia coming to the Kenya School, what we now call the Kenya School of Government, to learn and understand these things. Actually, sessional papers and details of what should be done in such corporations were formed here. And if you look at even, say, the Japanese way of doing business, the Chinese way of doing business, any big Chinese company, I'm giving these two as an example, you'll find government involvement. Like you hear of China Road and something or the other, or the government gets involved. You hear of some big Japanese corporation, even if it's these huge vehicle manufacturers, their government has a say in it. They're private enterprises, but the government has a say. And it's for that reason that they rarely collapse, because when it gets to a point where things are really wrong, the government gets involved. Now, we were pioneers in this field, and we actually worked very, very successful at it. This isn't those days when we were saying what went wrong. No. I'm saying, what is it that can be twisted and turned so that it's not just the perspective, but that these things can actually start achieving the things that they were intended to do, because they exist, they're still there, and they can be turned around. Instead of bringing in new projects that don't seem to go anywhere. I'm not referring to the railway. I actually like the railway to Soso, and I think it is going somewhere. But what is it? How? What is this? This, because this isn't the big thing that can twist this thing and turn it so that the full benefits of these wonderful ideas can actually be felt within the country. That's the question I'm asking. I'm saying I have an answer. The answer is in strong leadership. Strong, deliberate leadership.
Of?
Right from the very top, cascading down. Because I know this is a song I've sung many times, but I'm saying this because I'm actually seeing it happening. I'm seeing it happening in that it's said the government isn't doing anything. It is not true. Why did I mention the railway? If you think of the purpose of infrastructure and what infrastructure is supposed to do, it's supposed to spur development. We've heard it said it many times in this very studio that the government's job is to create that atmosphere. It does. Look at that area of Sosua, look at Naivasha, look at the underutilized land that is in that particular region. It used to take you an hour by matatu to Naivasha. You know, railway, there's no jam.
Right.
No, there's no jam. And there's no traffic police. And there's no overspeeding. So when you get onto that, it just goes, or it comes now.
If it's 80, it's 80.
It's 80, and it'll be 80 until it arrives where it's going to go. Can you imagine how that area would open up if there was a train that actually takes people there. Remember, I said over the weekend I was in Karatina. I went to visit my former classmate and people with whom we went to visit our headmaster of the school we went to. He's a retired civil servant, but he was a very prolific civil servant. So prolific that a lot of what we do in education before it started being moved around, there's something called the Kamunge Commission. Kamunge was the gentleman. He set that up. But other countries, came to ask about this and to understand just how powerful that commission was. He retired from government, worked for UNICEF on education matters, In fact, he spent another 25 years after retirement simply advising world bodies on education. Now, this is Kenya. Other countries adopted what we did. So when I say we were pioneers, we actually were. And in many ways, we still are. Now, this spirit that makes us stand out is something we must not let escape.
We must harness this.
Yes, because it's a unique thing that we have. We have the energy for it. And there are enough people who have the gusto and the will to actually push it forward. And I'm saying, yes.
You're suggesting that the state owns more enterprises.
I am suggesting that the state jails people who have been given tasks to perform and do not perform. Not just take them to court. Make it a matter of urgency. Let those cases be heard. Let it be moved swiftly and let them go to jail. Because these people, you've heard me say this, so let me repeat it again. When someone is given a government position and is supposed to look after the welfare of the people, and in not doing it, he brings destitution and poverty to people, and some end up dying, that person is a murderer. And when people understand that those jobs are given to people who want to do them and have the will to, if you want to do business, don't become a civil servant. Go and do business. But you can't do business with the lives of people, because that's what you end up doing. It's not state resources, it's lives.
So which are these state corporations that, for example, you're looking at?
Let's start with pipeline. Then from pipeline, I'll go to National Housing Corporation. Okay? Once a thriving body that was mandated with the task of building these things, the agenda for that we keep talking about. Let's talk about KPA.
Kenya Ports Authority.
Yes. And then let's talk about these banks that the government has a big say in. The ones who are notorious for collapsing more than
National
providing
Bank.
Useful, yes. Because instead of showing the way of how banks can actually lead the sector, remember what we have. The government has shares in Safaricom. Safaricom, which is a communication company, is now leading the way and showing financial companies how to manage finance. And I'm saying, the state is clever enough to invest in a company like that. It means it understands what needs to be done. And it even understands the sort of people it can put in. And it even understands how it makes sure that these things get done. They understand it.
But also it brings the question, and this is a discussion that keeps happening all the time. Should the state actually get involved in these matters, in such kind of businesses?
Maybe
Should the state be investing, for example, in Kenya Pipeline?
When you say get involved, how?
Like invest. Should the state be
Well,
investing in housing?
They own it, and it's a monopoly. My question is, sorry, I haven't understood what you're saying today, because we started off with talking about state-owned enterprises, and we've moved on to these leaders.
No, I covered my base very well. I talked about institutions where the government has shares, state corporations, and I said parastatals.
Right.
Where there's state involvement, and I said whether it's wholly owned, whether it's partially owned, whether they just have shares. These are investments that the state makes on behalf of its citizenry. All of them. One, they have a monopoly of say, some partial, some small. They're just a shareholder, but they have a say. And I gave the example of other countries where the state has a say. You may not know so, but they do.
Right.
And they're successful enterprises that actually make the nation's money, and it makes the business people with whom they work with also money. Yes. So I'm saying the state can actually go into business. But ours, the point, and you are right in saying you don't get it. I am saying that the problem with our state-owned institutions is that you get the impression that they are properties of the CEOs.
They're money-making ventures.
For the CEOs.
For the person who's been
for the
placed
CEOs,
there.
Well, we've seen it with KPLC and so on in the past, definitely.
Yes.
So your assertion is that
the government should take control. The government should take back the control and remove this terrible ISO that we have of leaders who seem to feel that whenever the government has given you a position, and by the way, I'm talking about state corporations. No, if you, I'm talking about state corporations today, but if you cast your eye just a little to the left and even look at government ministries, you'll find the same attitude exists, where people seem to run a ministry as though it's their property. They issue statements, they say things, and you're wondering, what's the foundation of this? It's an attitude and a mindset. Now, I'm saying it doesn't benefit the citizenry. It doesn't. The underlying statement I'm making here is, look, we have resources upon resources, and we are allowing individuals to mismanage it. That's why the president, this path that he has started of taking people to court and not letting go, these cases should be fast-tracked so that we can actually see people going to jail. It will be useful.
How can they be fast-tracked? Should we overlook some aspects of the right to a fair trial in terms of the investigations or maybe the threshold for evidence?
From a legal perspective, that's a really tricky one. But let me just say this. When I say fast track, the argument has been that they don't have sufficient evidence. But then why do you take them to court in the first place? What are you taking them to court for if you didn't have evidence? I'm a layman here, I don't understand. I assume someone is taken to court when there's evidence that shows that they need to go to court to answer something. Isn't that how it works?
Sure. I mean, what's happening, and we've seen this recently with some rulings, is that there's some laws and some technical loopholes that people, of course, are exploiting. So, for instance, I give the example with Kibra where he was able to stop evidence being used against him because of the way in which it was obtained, so it becomes inadmissible in court. Now, what we should be able to do as Kenyans who are looking to fight corruption is maybe loosen some of these laws, so you can understand why evidence and admissibility can be important maybe in other aspects of law, but when it comes to corruption, perhaps maybe the legal framework needs to change slightly so as to allow for evidence to be collected, or so as to tighten the loopholes and the legal technicalities that some of these people are sort of exploiting to get away with it.
Doesn't the law allow for special dispensations that can be given to, say, special prosecutors or special investigators to circumvent these things? Is it possible within the law?
I think the only time the law has been changed slightly is terrorism. That's the time where the law has been used differently in terms of how long you can hold a person for, what sort of evidence can be used.
Let's discuss that when we come out of the break. Good morning. It's 28 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is the Situation Room.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Traffic.
Let's see what's happening on the roads this morning. Not much. That we don't have much of bumper-to-bumper traffic just yet in different parts of the city of Nairobi. Again, schools have closed, and so a lot of the roads that would ordinarily be clogged up at this time are not. Looking at Ngong Road, Naivasha Road is now open. So Naivasha Road and Riara Road open now after about 2 weeks of construction work that has been taking place. So perhaps the traffic on the road will be less this morning, but we must just wait and see. All right. There is a little bit of traffic on Mombasa Road coming out of General Motors section heading towards Bellevue. So let's see how that opens up around about 7 o'clock this morning. Coming off onto the thicker superhighway, a little bit of traffic coming out of Allsops, coming from the Muthaiga roundabout and trying to get towards Pangani and enter into the CBT. Let's see how things unfold in about half an hour, and then we'll let you know. 0719-012-600.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Good morning at 26 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation on Spice FM. We are live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE, on our YouTube channel, that's Spice FM KE, on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. I'm Eric Latif. We have Jerry Thorne, Ndu Oko, and CT Muga, who's talking about government involvement in some of these businesses. And he says that this was actually a very good idea. You know, if you look at it on paper, very good idea for government to get involved.
Even the practice of it in the early years, it was a good practice.
There's hardly... What is the basis of you saying it's a good idea? Because that in itself is a debate. You know, it exposes itself to a lot of corruption, political interference.
That's what came to be. It didn't start that way.
But you'll find generally even the workers aren't as motivated. They don't own it, so you know.
No, they actually. If you look at the structure, if you look at ICDC, this issue of shareholding and the stock market and what have you, ICDC were at the forefront of it. Many of these companies that the government owned, people were allowed to own it. I mean, the people they put at the forefront were actually the employees. When I said these ideas were good, they were really good ideas.
But you realize government-owned enterprise, of course, in turn is communism to a certain extent.
No, I don't see it that way. Sorry.
Right. Well, it is that way. When the government starts to
Jerry,
own the businesses,
it
if the
isn't
government
that way.
owned all the businesses, that would be
Why
communism.
don't we go to the basics? Who decides what the government does should be communism? Who? And who says the government
No.
can't be
It
involved in
is
business?
that is a communist model, so to speak, or socialist model. They call it.
If you
these
say it
days.
has been known as a socialist
No,
model,
that is what a socialist model is, when the government owns the businesses and the enterprise. And what it does is lock
other
other
smart
players
governments
out.
in the West own these things indirectly. That's what they do, but they still own it. And ownership is not, I own the block of flats. I just need to have influence. That's ownership. And governments do that. So it's not as though it is. If you say it's a model, I could say, yes, the communists adopted the top-down approach, but it is said as though it's something negative and something that shouldn't be done. And I'm saying, no, that's not the case.
No, it does have its setbacks in terms
And
of limiting.
what system doesn't have setbacks?
Limiting its innovation and things
What
like that.
system doesn't have limitations?
No, every system might have its setbacks, but it's there's no harm in discussing the setbacks of government or state-owned enterprises. I personally don't think it's a good idea. Of course, it creates cheaper and affordable services, especially sort of water, electricity. You can see why the state would want to control these, but it can also create more expensive ones because you don't have other players in the market. So what happens is, because they monopolize it, they can actually dictate the prices, and it has the advantage, of course, sort of in terms of how can I put it? Controlling certain sectors, economic sectors, strategically. So, for instance, things like making weapons and things like that. If there was a private company doing that, you'd want maybe the government to be involved in that, or atomic research and so on.
Why don't I give you examples of Kenya and why this thing was actually very beautiful?
And how it worked well. I mean,
Yes, because you'll find, for instance, the hotel industry was private sector, but the government through ICDC owned hotels and owned shares. And you know what they influenced? They even influenced individuals who had SACCOs to own or buy shares in hotels. There's a gentleman called Tuva who was MP for Malindi many years ago. He created a very powerful SACCO. For the first time, indigenous locals own shares in hotels like Eden Rock, which were pillars. They were huge hotels. They own shares in the Kenya Cashew Nut SACCOs, local SACCOs. It was this idea. All I'm trying to say is, this idea was one of these ideas you can dismiss offhand. It was a beautiful idea. Let me pause there and just even ask you, how many of you know what formerly was the Kenya Institute of Education, what it was supposed to do? Essentially, it was for curriculum development. And you know how far-reaching that work has actually been? Not for Kenya, just for people who've come to actually learn what we do. Because people do come and they train. Or what we now call Kenya School of Government, which was formerly Kenya School of Administration.
Or even things like Kenya Agricultural Research Institute and the work that they did and the information that they still continue to share today. It's interesting that you say this, because I look at, or even just having listened to people who worked within this environment previously, there was a bit of a sense of pride in what they were able to do and what they were able to achieve. So then it begs the question now, that what happened between then and now, whereby we see individuals coming together and holding down fort, as it were, and actually getting things done in corporations or organizations then that were buttressed by the government. Still government, but it worked and things flowed and things happened and achievements or rather results were achieved. And these were individuals, not special people from some other planet, individuals, Kenyans here. So then how did we misroad, as it were? As it were, you know?
How the road miss us.
Exactly. Yeah. Because then what happened? The same institutions exist today.
They do.
We still have individuals existing within this country today. So where do we lose
Jerry, we haven't lost it.
We haven't lost it. You know, the real twist is some of those institutions still work.
They're still very good.
And they work just as well.
If you think
That's
about
really the issue.
Kenya Medical Research Institute does a lot of good work. Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization now, KARI, is now KALRO. It's still a leading organization
on the continent.
in this region.
Continent.
Even the Kenya Meteorological Department, it's actually one of those that are looked at in Africa by the World Meteorological Organization. They look at Kenya Met, and what Kenya Met tells them about weather is what they take globally.
Even if it takes a week for it to actually occur.
You see, now that's the thing. It doesn't work that way. Actually, they do get.
I'm joking.
They do get a lot of
I am joking.
Yeah, I know.
I am joking.
And this is the public. This is what the public actually looks at, and they think, oh well, it doesn't work. It actually, we haven't lost it.
I'll tell them, hold it, not yet. When did you say it? No, give it a week.
Give it a week. It's gonna rain.
In the course of this month.
I said it.
Forecast.
I said it's going to rain.
So it's a forecast.
This month. The month goes by. When did I say it? And I said this month. Was I specific? No. I'm going to be specific now. This month.
Funny enough, we don't have the weather report in the news anymore, do we? Remember, we used to have that in Swahili. It was Hali.
We still get it.
We get it.
The weather report where there's a man who stands by.
Even a lady. And then there are all these images of what they call clouds.
Is that every day?
Daily.
The thing is, well, in the other media houses, you see, if you talk about weather, if you think about it, in Kenya, weather, what are you predicting? That it's going to rain this morning?
We know it's going to rain.
We can already tell it's going to rain. We wake up in the morning, you can tell how the weather is going to look like. It's a season, it's a dry season, it's a dry season, it's a rainy season, it's a rainy season. What are you telling me? So now
I don't think it was done that so that you can understand that you need to carry your umbrella. But in that case, carry your umbrella. But also, look at why things like weather were predicted in other places. It's for purposes of planning, as a country.
And also they have adverse weather,
right? And if you have adverse weather patterns, then it's going to.
Do you know that meteorology is actually a very specific science?
It is. People actually go and study it. It's precision.
This hit and miss image I'm giving, please forgive me, I'm actually just joking here. They are actually very good at what they do.
Can I just get something clear? There's a weather report at the end of the news bulletin every day?
Okay. Now, this
depends
sounds
on
strange
which
to you.
bulletin are you looking at?
So if you watch the 9 o'clock news, there's a weather report at the end?
No.
On any station.
Eric, you're answering the wrong question.
So on KTN, for instance.
Which station are you watching?
So KTN.
It's not even station. Jerry, immediately after the news, not 2 hours later.
I know there's the football, like there's the sports.
That's how I'm telling you. You tell after the news. She says, I watch after the news. Then you have to ask Jerry, how many hours after the news? And on which day? Because she watches TV like once a week.
On which day?
Yes.
No, after the news you have the sports, right?
What time of the day?
Which news?
The 9 o'clock bulletin.
9 o'clock in the evening or morning?
Evening. Okay. There is a 9 o'clock bulletin.
There you might get weather. Yeah, the likelihood of getting weather there is good, but it has to be immediately after the news.
Yeah,
after the football.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now the announcement
after the sports,
of death and so forth. That's on radio, not TV.
I know there's no obituaries on TV, but there's still the news. The weather, is there? I haven't seen it for years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now the reality is, many of the other TV stations will not show you weather. I mean, because of the same reason I'm giving you. I mean, when you're sitting there and you're a programmer for TV, you're thinking, so what am I going to tell people about the weather? Unless if it's something major that Met has said, it's going to come as part of the news. So the Met has warned that this is going to happen.
We used to have that guy, and he used to stick things on the map of Kenya.
Yes.
Do you remember, like a cloud?
He used to do very well. I actually liked him.
So you're saying the government should own the weather? Or?
No, the government does own the weather.
Right.
and this one works.
No, we're talking about state corporations.
Yeah, because when it rains, we know it rains.
So state corporations, and you're pushing for them or you're against them?
I am saying that there is a nice synergy that can exist.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, this was a homegrown thing, okay? To be honest, it was homegrown, where we understood, and our former colonial masters helped tremendously with these things, and they understood and said, it is possible. And let me say why I said our colonial masters did. There was the East African, I'm talking about the commercial aspect of colonialism. I'm trying to remember the name.
Protectorate.
Yes.
East India Company.
Thank you, got it. When it went to India, it was called East India. When a similar enterprise came to Africa, it was called something else.
East India.
And
It
Okay.
was.
That one, East India Africa, East Africa. That company involved government participation. It involved commercial participation. It involved everybody. So it was an idea that had worked when they were carrying out the enthusiastic colonial processes. Now, the idea of making it possible for the government to have a say and to participate and eventually benefit and profit from such an enterprise is what brought about what I was calling ICDC. Now, it's the willful and wanton and negative activities of those who are given the mandate to head these institutions that started killing the enterprise. When I said these enterprises were good, believe me, many Kenyans had shares in these enterprises. This idea of individuals getting to do something that could benefit them at individual, it took root very early in this country, very, very early.
So let's come to the present.
Yes.
Right? See, they are working.
Actually, ask yourself a very simple question. Why do you think equity, which we refer to as equity.
Equity.
So, why do you think it's been so successful? Why was it so successful? To the point where investors, hard-nosed investors in the West looked and said, no, this one
is a big one.
No, this one we can invest. What do you think they did? Not anything different. They allowed participation of the simplest mwananchi, simplest, to be part of it.
Commercial model.
And they did something that nobody thought they could do or could be done. They overtook KCB.
That's very interesting that you say that, because if we just take a snapshot of corporations or institutions that have actually succeeded beyond that will actually get global attention, this is exactly what they did.
You've got it.
Yeah, this is exactly what they did. Made it very simple, made it accessible to the people, and gave them what they felt that they were involved in the process, and they saw the benefits, and that could actually feel them, and those organizations succeed. The same can be replicated across to government organizations.
Like
that
what,
can be done.
Kenya Pipeline?
Yes. The idea can be incorporated anyway if you really think about it, whether it's a refinery. Remember, we did have a refinery and we didn't have any oil that we're producing. We're now producing oil and we have to ship it to be refined elsewhere. When you heard me say that one of the things we seem to be very good at is engaging the reverse gear, and I'm saying, no, let's stop this nonsense of engaging the reverse gear. We don't have to find ways of doing this. We already know what to do. We actually do, and we've done it. That's what I'm saying. We've done it. These aren't new things to us.
So when we're looking for the solution, and we say that it's necessary for us to have homegrown solutions to some of these issues that we have, the homegrown literally is homegrown. We can do it here. We've done it before, and we can continue. But I still have a problem trying to understand where there was a lapse, and that's clear.
The lapse is also clear. Remember I said, the president, I know it sounds a little facetious, but I mean it. Strong leadership starts actually from the very top. That's the truth of the matter. The power of example. And when I talked about fast tracking this case, and Jerry came in with a very good suggestion. He said, look, you just can't break the law. So I asked, but is there a special dispensation that can be created? And it appears that you can. Because if someone committed murder in the form of denying the mwananchi things that would keep them alive, that person really ought to be in jail.
Let me open up the phone lines now. 0719 012 600. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life.
13 minutes to 7 o'clock. Good morning. This is Spice FM, broadcasting in Nairobi, 94.4. We are in Mombasa on 87.9. We are in Kisumu, 102.5. Nakuru, 96.0, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, and 97.7 in Malindi. The phone lines are open. 0719 012 600. City Muga is saying this morning that, well, we've had the formula. We have had it working, and it should continue working. Let's look at how the government, the state, actually has gotten itself involved in very many of our businesses, but it made them work. Other people came and borrowed from here, and it's been working. Let's continue to make it work and make sure that those people who are entrusted to run them actually do perform. Where is the problem? Where did, as Nduoko is saying, where did the road miss us, or did we miss the road?
Where did we miss road?
Where did we miss road?
It starts off with people who are given the mandate to manage those institutions and mismanage them and nothing happens. It starts there. So successive leaders feel, well, if those guys could get the power of example, if they could get away, why can't I continue?
Why can't I do the same?
Because if
To understand this, let me explain to you. If you say, for instance, go to many parts of this city, there are very many properties, I'm talking about commercial properties, that were actually owned at some point by ICDC. Like Upper Hill, I'll give you an example. That place where the World Bank was, and now you have NTSC. It's called NTSA. That one, yes. That whole arm was ICDC owned. There were beach hotels in hotels in Mombasa. After a while, you heard of individuals now owning those hotels. Same with Uchumi. You actually forgot that ICDC exists now. ICDC is what you now call Centum. I don't know at what point it stopped being ICDC and also became just a private enterprise. Now, you need to understand this. Because it had the portfolio.
ICDC still exists, actually.
They're
in Uchumi House. Uchumi House, this one in CBD, where we have Nairobi Cinema.
That building is also theirs.
Yes.
What do they do?
It's based there. Whatever the same thing they were supposed to do. Their mandate hasn't changed.
I'm trying to tell you.
Their mandate has not changed.
I was saying that the business portfolios that they owned went elsewhere. That's why I brought in this name. All right? It shifted. Then
so I'm not understanding this. You're a proponent of government involvement in private business, or
I am a proponent.
In enterprise.
I'm a proponent of ideas that can guarantee huge strides in growth in a country in which the government can be involved in.
So you want the government to get involved more in enterprise?
No, I want the government to get involved in enterprises that are transparent, because for one simple reason, when the government is involved, you're essentially saying that people are involved. There's no better way of understanding what business is than when an entity that already looks after your interests in your day-to-day life is involved. It makes sense, and you see, so this is what happens. Why I took it back to the days of ICDC, we didn't understand business, but the government always is the biggest business entity you can actually interact with. Right. So when they're involved in something, then they involve the citizenry. The likelihood of growth is always greater. Now, it may be messed up. There are those who argue KTDA was a mess up. There are those who argue that the Kenya Coffee Board was a mess up. But in living memory, and it's documented, these enterprises at a time were the farmers' darlings, because they made sure farmers did well, and farmers in this country were well to do because their businesses were managed well. But if you look back, it was the people who were put in leadership then. They actually manage these things very well.
So our problem is the ukora in the people who got into it.
But it crept in at some point, because the individuals, just from stories that I hear of how things worked in this country, and I'll just look at the public system where you had Kenya Bus, for example. The buses arrived on time. You could be sure that you would come get this bus and be able to go from point A to point
Government
B.
Involvement.
At 12:15, I take the bus. At 12:45, I get where I'm going. I finish my business. 2 o'clock, I'll be sure to get the bus on time. And there was a route. People followed the route. Those rules were met.
You gave a beautiful example.
So,
beautiful, and it's true. The local authorities were involved. They had a terminus, you knew. They were given subsidies. The thing about subsidies, the government doesn't have to take money from its pocket. It just says, we won't charge you this tax. They've participated. And you can compete those taxes into money, because if they don't charge you, it's like they're giving it to you, isn't it?
Right.
But there's a long-term gain in it, because you've brought in structure and order, and in a way that the citizen can rely on.
Right. And the people who ran this machine essentially are citizenry.
Yes.
The people who ran this. So basically what the government has done, it says, here is this machine, and we've been able to, we've given you the machinery, and we've given you the wherewithal that you can, but now what we're saying is that you now run it. But we've set the rules, we've set the regulations, go ahead with it and make it work. And it worked. So then take a skip a few steps, a few years ahead, and then we have total, in the same sector, which used to be so total disorder completely. And you can look at the same thing that happened in city council in the 90s or in the 80s, where things actually worked, where processes were met, followed, etc. But then 10 years down the line, there's total disorder, there's total chaos.
Probably then we should just accept this is what is happening now. This is what we have. Everybody who's in public service, everybody who's appointed to lead these organizations, they're not doing it for the benefit of the country. They're doing it for their personal benefit.
Exactly.
And we should say forget it.
It's like they're running a private business.
Then we should just say, forget it. Accept forget it. Let government not get involved at all in these things.
But Eric, you're throwing the baby water with the bath water, and you're forgetting that before certain individuals, even when you talk about individuals who run down corporations, there are others who actually ran the corporations up. The corporations worked. Let's talk about now. Let's talk about the here and now. Look at KenGen. Just look at KenGen. There was an individual who was in charge of KenGen, and KenGen literally grew. This geothermal thing we talk about, do you know that the repository of geothermal in Kenya, there's none other to compare with on this entire continent. This
we have
one
the most.
by far. And there was an individual who ensured that this, Edin Njoroge is his name, he actually harnessed this thing and brought it to where it was taken over from. So it's not as though there are people who aren't doing what they're supposed to do. There are people who are doing what they're supposed to do. This gentleman we call Matiang'i, now this isn't business. I'm just talking about people who've done things when he was in education. And there was Professor Magoha, he was then in charge of the National Examination Council. All this cheating nonsense that we have in the country dissipated. It didn't happen in another place. It happened here. So if you're asking about people who can do we do have it. It's not that we don't. You don't shut it down. You make it uncomfortable and really, really dangerous for people who want to carry that particular thing.
Right.
And not by threats. It has to be by deed.
By actual action.
Yes, it has to be by deed. And until it sinks and says, if I do this, I know I'm in trouble. But so far, the message has been, you can get away with it. So other people come in, and what they're emulating is not the good work, but how to get away. That is the example that is being followed. The enterprise has nothing wrong with it. It is the leaders who have decided to subvert.
But we've tried many times.
No,
Look
we
at
haven't.
Kenya Pipeline.
No, we haven't. We've tried the wrong thing. We've tried the wrong thing.
Try changing the people. Now, we're going to have a new board of the Kenya Ferry Service. Right? We have
If
disbanded an entire
those
board of the Kenya
fellows
Ferry
who
Service.
were in the ferry before this thing got disbanded aren't held to account for the misdeeds that led to the death. You were talking about the death because it was terrible. But the perilous situation they put the citizenry on a daily basis. Just because an accident doesn't happen, it means that harm isn't being created.
How about actually going the other way and privatizing these companies? Or rather opening up the market. So let's take KPLC, for example. We could do with some competitors in the market. It would actually make people or KPLC provide better services, and there would be competition in terms of pricing and so on. So as opposed to trying to look for better people at the helm of some of these state-owned corporations, parastatals and so on, if we opened up the market, it would also create space for innovation. At the moment, KPLC has no competition. It's not trying to do any better than anybody else. It's not trying to outprice anybody. So maybe going the other way and actually privatizing some of these state-owned enterprises, corporations.
Open up
and
the
so
monopolies that where
Absolutely.
the state is. Have another pipeline.
Absolutely.
That is actually a good thing. However, if you still have one organization where the government has stake in, that thing is gonna die. So let's just start by privatizing that.
It does die. You
Look
saw
at the
with
National
Kenya
Oil
Post.
Corporation.
You saw with Kenya Post and Telecommunications.
Okay. We privatized water, didn't we? How's that one working out?
Well, it's still government. Yes, it's private. Yes, the water provision at the last mile is a private company. It's not private company. You have a lot of stake by government.
You see,
It's still government.
The government owns the country on our behalf, runs it on our behalf. As a start from there. And so a resource like water can't be owned by a private individual. Really, you can't. Even if it's your land and you drill a borehole, you don't have 100%.
It is government water.
No, yes.
Right.
So this we understand. So it isn't that I'm speaking of Eric. Eric, I'm saying this road of despondency and despair is one we've gone on for a long, long, long time. I myself have been a proponent of it, and I've lost no opportunity in lambasting the government and saying everything that every other Kenyan does. And I'm saying enough of that. We know what works. Even now, we have institutions that work. But, Eric, you've heard me say this. You see, the port doesn't have an option but to succeed because they have no competition. But they can make it more efficient. And that's what they're trying to do.
What would motivate them to make it more efficient if they don't have any competition?
More money.
That they would get more money?
Yes, if you're more efficient, you get more money. because you're able to move
You
more
become
ships.
more
You see, the
profitable.
government
Yes,
isn't
more
profit
profits.
making per se. It's not looking for profits. It can be argued that way. Whereas if they opened it up where it was profit making companies that come into it, then they become more competitive and become more efficient, and it's
the
better for the
port-
public. in
And the
terms
Kenya
of
Ports
service.
Authority would die. Let me open up the phone lines again. 0719 012 600. That's 0719 012 600. Please join into this conversation. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. We're right here, all of us. Jerry Thorne, Ndu, of course, C.T. Mugana, I'm Eric Latif. It's coming up to 7 o'clock. The conversation we're having is about, government involvement in corporations and business. Good morning. It's 7.
Monday morning on the roads of Nairobi. There's no traffic on Thika Road except just a bit at the Garden City Mall area. Coming off Mombasa Road, it is not a bumper-to-bumper situation, and that is what we want to see and absolutely enjoy this morning. Gong Road definitely has opened up. I understand there are less vehicles on the road this morning because schools have closed, and let's see how that changes in about an hour or so. But for now, it's easy street, basically, on most of the roads that we see around. Unless I'm wrong, do give me a call or send me a message. 0719012600. Let's see how we can make sure that you keep moving this Monday morning.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
2 minutes after 7 o'clock. Good morning and thank you for joining us. The Situation Room is Kenya's biggest conversation. We're broadcasting in Nairobi, 94.4. We're in Malindi, we're in Nyeri, Eldoret, Nakuru, Kisumu, Mombasa. We're worldwide because we are live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE. We're also live streaming on YouTube, that is Spice FM KE, and on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Our hashtag on Twitter is The Situation Room, and our Twitter handle is Spice FM KE. C.T. Muga is raising the issue of government involvement in state corporations this morning.
Kenyans seem to think that Kenya Power Lighting Company is actually a government organization. It isn't. It's listed.
It's listed on the NSE.
Yes, it is. It isn't. So if you're giving it an example of bad management of government, it actually should be bad management of a private company.
But the government has a lot of stay in this thing.
Yes, Eric, it does. The government has an interest in many things. I am saying it isn't as though it's doom and gloom for everything the government is involved in when you have leadership who actually know how to carry out the mandate. We've talked about KPA, and what you're saying is true. And progressive-minded CEOs of KPA have understood this, and they've encouraged it. That's why we've been building all these new birds and allowing people to actually privatize, meaning leasing it out to a private individual, so that he leases it, they pay you, but they run it. Many ports in the world are run that way. The government still owns the land and everything, but they lease it to you. It's that thinking that has even led to the Lamu port. Now, people don't quite understand the impact of that Lamu port. It's serious. It's serious because the existence of that port is going to cut short the passaging of goods into this region by something stupendous, among other things.
I agree with you to a certain extent, but it should work slightly differently. I think the government's involvement in private companies as an investor should now be what we are seeing more of. You see that in China. If a company is doing very well, you have the company, or rather the government, come in and actually blow it up in terms of grow it by investing. So maybe this is one way to go. If we're looking at manufacturing, instead of waiting for the government to do so, it's actually one of the big four in the agenda. But instead of doing that, what the government can do is actually look at manufacturers and boost them through investment so that they have a stake in them. But in terms of currently state-owned corporations, I think it's a dying trend, and so it should be. I don't believe in this idea because it becomes highly politicized. As I say, there's a negative attitude of the workers. There's very little competition. Of course, it's cheaper and affordable, and it creates
Not
jobs.
necessarily.
But I think it's in terms of...
But Jerry, consider, which entity do you have in this country who can actually bring in big-scale investors? It's the government. How did JICA get involved in the pot? It's through the government.
Well, it's obviously because, in terms of negotiation share, definitely government would have a bigger kind of credibility factor.
How did we
in terms
build
of when it comes to
JKU
negotiating?
It was JICA. It's government. I'm simply trying to say, don't minimize government involvement as being all negative. There are things we enjoy now which wouldn't be there without the government's involvement in the right place. And when it's again...
Like this new referral hospital that's opening today, the big one at Kenyatta University. Government.
Yes. Look, if the person who is at the helm actually does what they're supposed to do. Remember, this story is emanating. I'm telling you, when I spoke to my former headmaster, his commission actually was looking at, 1998, they were looking at what education and the things that relate to it can do for the next 10 years and beyond. It wasn't a 10-year thing. It wasn't a decade. It went beyond. I'm simply saying, when you look at a gentleman of that sort, these are the third tier of people left Makerere. In those days, Form 4, Makerere, okay? Third. First were people like Kibaki. Then there was a second lot. The third lot. But they were headhunted from Makerere, and they were being given jobs of assistant secretary. Now, there are people like him and others, the gentlemen, who had said, no, they want to be teachers. They could have been permanent secretaries much earlier, but they didn't go that route. They wanted to become teachers. And remember, they were taking over from the white people who had been in these institutions. So they were actually people who were torchbearers. They almost had a blank slate to do exactly what they wanted, but they didn't pilfer.
They did the right thing.
Yeah, this scale of sheer madness that we see wasn't there.
It's political. What we have now is basically, it's political led. And I agree with what Jerry is saying. It becomes completely highly politicized. So we talk about our person.
So we ran away from it because it's politicized.
Yes.
Deal with the politics.
No, I think that the government...
We are not able to deal with this politics.
Oh, yes, we are.
We are talking about tribalism every day. That's why we're even talking about BBI.
I don't think it's about ability, because if we're talking about are we able to? Ability, I think we are more than able. If we're speaking about Kenya, more than able to get the job done. It's been proven before. It's the willingness.
I've managed to have a discussion this morning. Even Nigeria has not mentioned tribalism. Then Eric brings it.
Yes,
out of literally left field.
See? Because if you look at what has happened in those organizations, those corporations that have flopped, what is it? If you start from the very beginning, our person is at the helm. Our person gets us jobs. Our person is. And that's
but
it.
Even then,
and
those were some people's people.
No. In this particular case, we're talking about somebody who's a CEO of a certain organization, and every politician from their region comes and says, "Now it's our chance to actually get our people into this organization,
so that we can eat."
And it's wrong. And this is what has happened. And we don't fight it because it's political. It's actually politically motivated. And when you're trying to look at it from a political side of things, we're not going to be able to fight it.
I don't think that because of those reasons. I don't think then because of those reasons that we should then...
Eric, what did you eat on the weekend?
Something quite peppery, apparently.
this guy is just spewing negativity the whole morning.
And CT has actually started on a good note today, on a good positive note, which should be heralded, of course. However,
have you listened to
what I'm
the
saying
calm,
that because
reasoned way Jerry is bringing out these points, to the point where I can't disagree with her even if I want to, because she's making so much sense. Then Eric has to bring in tribalism.
But you see, because of those, I don't think those are reasons why obvious state machinery that has been set up and can succeed should be abandoned. Because again, we've seen examples around the world where state machinery has set things in place, and you have robust health initiatives, you have robust and vibrant education policies and things like that, and they work for the citizenry of the country. Just because of that, then we abandon them and say, well, the state cannot, so therefore let's either hand them over to private enterprise and let them do
we don't
it.
have to go far. If these things didn't just work for us, but they worked for other people, it means they work.
They work. That's what I'm saying.
So
absolutely, they work.
Let it not be as we intended it, because it worked then. Why don't
But
you
why don't
you say, okay, folks, give us this day and age?
But we've got to start by accepting where we are. You're asking, where did we miss the road? That's where we started missing the road. When we started politicizing these things. When you allowed tribal politics to get into these things. Yes, you find the people at the coast are saying the head of KPA must be a coastal. And the head of KPA being a coastal, then the next thing is our people must get employment. Merit? No.
No,
where you come from, yes.
Eric, go a little gently on that one. It isn't just tribal, it isn't just politics. Those are power dynamics. If people from a region feel, it starts with them feeling already marginalized and disempowered. So the one asset they think they can call their own by virtue of its geographical location happens with the port. And if they then say they want to have a say in it, I don't think we should dismiss it and just say, no. That one you tread a little gently.
All right.
Yes.
So let's go gently into it, okay?
Yes.
But then the politics starts coming into it.
Yes, it does.
And the politics of it is not the politics of let's get a qualified person to run it, because that happens. So you get a qualified person to run it, but also let's flood it with our people because we owe it to ourselves. Because our head of the CS for energy is from this tribe, then the head of all the organizations, the corporations in the energy sector, pipeline, on all, must be from the same tribe. And this is what happens. Look at the top level management of some of these organizations.
So you're saying that these individuals have also been, whether the appointments are made because it's your person who is at the helm of leadership at that time, they're brought in, and even these individuals can't get the job done right. Same individuals can't get the job done right, and that is why these organizations fall through.
Eric, are you saying that we should balance it?
With tribal appointments?
I mean, that's what he seems to be suggesting, because you see...
No, he's saying that where we went wrong, essentially, is that individuals were brought in as favors to the person who was at the helm of leadership, and these appointments were made tribally, politically, etc., etc., and that is the reason why then these corporations fell through.
This isn't a theoretical issue, okay? It isn't theoretical. Appointments usually are political. Favors being done, political. The world over. It's just a simple reality. I'm not complicating it.
Right, but Eric says that these appointments should be made on merit.
He has a point, but what he's saying, it should be balanced.
Let me pick this call. Alan is calling in from Kilifi. Good morning, Alan.
Morning, how are you, Eric?
Salama kabisa. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Asante sana.
You have a comment on this?
Yes, just a very brief comment on the topic this morning. Basically, the way I see it, I think government involvement in state corporation is not necessarily something bad, something that we need to shun. It can actually create more benefits, but I think that requires a government that really knows what it wants to achieve. So, take an example of Rwanda. I don't know how much government involvement there is in their state corporations, but basically Rwanda is an emerging economy within the East African region. Actually, within the African continent, people are taking notice. Why is it that Rwanda is doing it and Kenya can't do it? It really boils down to, number one, political will. Leadership that is actually guided by transparency, accountability, and integrity. So where you have leaders that, number one, get into power through very dubious means, basically it means that they're only accountable to themselves, and their small clique that bankrolls them. But we've seen in the past that actually state-owned corporations used to work. You guys have talked about the transport sector. When when we had the Kenya buses and the Nyayo buses, I was basically young, and you could actually see that it was working. We have so many other examples that that we can give, but why is it that the story today is different? My only fear with privatization is that it ends up decentralizing.
Yes, that word.
That word exactly. Yeah, yeah. So it decentralizes a big section of the population.
Yeah.
And we can see that with education and medical care, for example, where now access to services is left to those who can actually afford. And when you do that, you actually don't grow the people. So state-owned corporations can actually basically mean that the government invests in its people, and where they actually look at development in terms of increasing the lot of its people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be infrastructure.
Thank you, Alan.
There was actually a shift in Kenya, of course, with the structural adjustment programs and the sort of stipulations that we were given by the IMF to move more towards this capitalist notion. So in this idea of state-owned corporations, you do realize you're leaning towards more the socialist model, the socialist economic model. But it's an interesting one. We bring up transport, which I think even in a lot of capitalist countries, you'll find that the government does provide transport. It's actually a service, a public service, so to speak, and things like hospitals, of course. But there's some sectors where we really shouldn't have government. I can understand them wanting to strategically control some sectors of the economy, understandably, and that's one advantage of having the state control some of these enterprises or some of these corporations. But there's some whereby if we had left it to their control, the innovation we see, for example, if we had Kenya Posts and Telecommunications, and that's who we had as and they had the sort of rigorous or rigid rules and licensing that they tend to when they want to control a sector, then we wouldn't see the likes of Safaricom come into the country. We wouldn't see Telcom and so on come into the country. We wouldn't see innovations such as M-Pesa and so on. So you have to be very careful, because what the government can actually do is curtail innovation in a bid, of course, to keep monopolizing.
You do understand that the era you
why
speak
do you
of...
laugh?
I'm laughing because you brought to memory something very interesting. It was a unique time because you had individuals collapsing monopolies.
Like KCC and so on.
Monopolies. Kenya National Assurance, a monopoly, collapsed.
Right. Kenya
Post,
right.
a monopoly. I mean, no competition whatsoever.
Services are needed and being used
and demanded for. It was collapsed. It was a unique time, but your point is made. Yes, it's a valid one. British Railway, there was a time they did privatize it, if I'm not wrong.
They did the PPP, so
Yes,
they brought in the private sector into some aspects of the service.
And things didn't quite work out.
No, they didn't. Those accidents and things like that. Because
Yes.
what happens is with things where there's life and death and safety, you find sort of the private companies, their mission is profiteering.
Yes.
So, of course, they might cut corners when it comes to safety measures. And that's why I think things like transport should be fully public services. But you can see in terms of things like telecommunications, can you imagine Kenya Posts coming up with M-Pesa? What was it called? Kenya Posts and Telecommunications?
Corporation.
That corporation.
What was it called?
There was postal. There was postal money where you could send money via the post.
Right, and it would actually get there.
Speed
yes,
post.
it
No.
would.
As in with like a money order.
Money order.
Like a money order. Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
It worked. As in the information you got
But
to
you're
the
not going
post
to
office.
compare that to M-Pesa.
It was very useful because it was same day transaction.
Right, you would send money
Telegram
Nairobi.
Do you
money
think they would have evolved to come up with an
Money order.
M-Pesa?
No, I was going to
equivalent
talk
of?
about the impediment of it. Because if a small postal office like Muhoroni, you would go there, they have the notice, that's where I come from, and they tell you, no one has deposited.
So we don't have cash to
We
give.
don't have
Cash to
float.
give you.
Floats.
Well, people
Essentially, that's what it
This
was.
is basically
people
a
had to
ton of
deposit
floats.
and send the money
So that they could
so they
get
could
to
have
give
money
you.
to give you. But don't you see to the M-Pesa also?
It's the same.
This
Don't
happens.
you go to M-Pesa and they tell you,
It's enough
I don't have float. But you see, they can access money from their account. They tell you, give me 10 minutes and I'll have the float. But, see? But technology now is what has made this one easier.
So I think it's necessary then. Perhaps what we should be looking at is the input of new advancements, new technologies, then to be able to change or tweak the way in which government has done its work before, then to make it more efficient and optimize services for the people. And that's what we should be looking at.
Look at the way the government manages exams, for instance. Nothing is scientific. If you consider the number of schools, the distances, and what have you,
across the country,
it is something to marvel at. And they do it well.
Exams are actually happening this week, and we wish all the best to the Standard 8 pupils who are sitting their exams this week. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Right here, it's at 19 minutes after 7 o'clock. The conversation continues. Good morning.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Mornings done right.
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
28th of October 2019. It's Monday. It's 20 minutes after 7 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting in Nairobi on 94.4. We're in Mombasa on 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, Malindi, we're on 97.7. And we live stream every morning on Facebook on Spice FM KE, on our YouTube channel, that is Spice FM KE, on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Follow us on Twitter, we're on Spice FM KE, and the hashtag every morning is the Situation Room. So we had a meeting last week, and this was happening in Sochi, Russia.
Right. So African presidents took up the call from Russian President Vladimir Putin and said, okay, come in and let's have a talk. Let's have a discussion about what it is that we want to offer you. Now, on the backdrop of all of this, we must look at how Russia now has entered itself into the market or onto the global market as an option for many countries, as a development partner, as a trade partner, as a friend, would it be in power, in all these power games. And so now Russia basically called upon Africa, and like we said, they met last Wednesday in Sochi, and they said, look, we would want to lend our hand of partnership to you, and let's see what we can do together. And we had this conversation, and we said, look, we hope that it is now an arena in which African countries and African presidents will go forward with their eyes open and get what they can for the best. And we're saying that, look, we have gotten to a point where you won't just continue taking help just from one partner. The options have opened up. Russia, even as an entity, has opened up in terms of what they can give and what they can offer for our development and what we can use. But we said, let's go in with our eyes open. The meeting has since happened, and we've already heard that these on the top of most of the agreements that were made, one of the top most things, apart from trade, was nuclear energy. And when we think nuclear, we think war. But in this case, nuclear then applies to how we can now increase in terms of provision of electricity and power, and which of course then would push things like industry and manufacturing, etc., etc. Now, off the cusp of this meeting that happened last week in Sochi on Wednesday, we are saying now the agreements have been met. We don't want a situation whereby poverty will be perpetuated because we're not able to take the agreements that have been made and do something tangible, something positive with them. We've gone in, hopefully, with our eyes open, and these agreements have been put on the table. I'm saying we must do something with them to our benefit and to our own advantage, as opposed to taking them, bringing them, trying to implement them, and then perpetuating the problem that we have of poverty in these countries, which have gone and made these agreements. Like I said, nuclear has been at the top of it, and the most recent entrant into agreement has been Rwanda, and they've said, we'd like to see what you can do, give us a chance. I'm saying, let's not let it stab us in the back.
Can I ask you a question, Ndu? What do we need nuclear power for when we have all this sunlight?
Well, it's an option in terms of what has been given. And just like we are saying that, the U.S. has been an option in terms of a development partner or in terms of donor funding. But here we are saying Russia has also come into the market. Yes, we have solar energy. We have not been able to tap it to the best that we can. But here is an offer that's being made to us for nuclear energy. And they're actually saying this is how you can actually go about it. We've done it. The only other country on the continent with a nuclear plant is South Africa. Nobody else has one on the continent.
What are the drawbacks?
It's an option. one.
What are the drawbacks to solar power?
Well, actually, there are really no drawbacks because, I mean, it's purely natural as opposed with nuclear power where you have a lot of environmental damage that could take place.
Okay, let's leave solar aside. What are the drawbacks of geothermal power? And while we're at it, wind power. These are things we have in abundance.
And we have them in abundance, but we've not...
we as Kenyans. Perhaps we didn't sign those deals. Rwanda did. That's that we know for sure. We don't know what we signed up to actually.
Well, there's an agreement of what will happen between Kenya and Russia.
Which is what?
And in terms of business, because again, we look at the African continent, and Kenya is actually the second largest trade partner with Russia right now. We're looking at things like flowers, tea,
Do tell us
coffee.
who the leader is. Who trades the most with the Russians?
It's interesting because I looked at those statistics, and Kenya came in second, and Nigeria. So I mean, the first one is me. So the second one is Kenya, okay, and
so this is across Africa.
This is across Africa.
So Kenya is actually the second.
Kenya is number 2,
trading
and
partner.
exports tea, coffee, flowers, vegetables. Actually,
Potatoes
very
for their
high.
vodka.
Oh, I think maybe they have some.
Maybe not.
They have efficient amounts of those. However, yes, Kenya the second largest after Nigeria. However, and also the imports from Russia are actually quite high. So in terms of trade, they've been partners.
What do we import from Russia? Into Africa, apart from arms? I'm sure Jerry's going to talk about
into Kenya specifically. I think I need to look more at the details of exactly what is. But in terms of what there was a direct agreement between Uhuru Kenyatta and Putin was looking at a trade council whereby there were actually individuals who sit and try to open the borders a little bit more and say, okay, more of what we can bring in, or how can we widen or broaden the agreements that we already have in place. In terms of nuclear energy, Kenya has not given the nod just yet, but maybe there will be some training in terms of arms.
For a long time, actually, Kenya has had the Nuclear Energy Commission, right? And maybe this is one of the areas where we would be looking at cooperating. But this brings me to what our parliament actually does. Because if you look at this kind of deals, when you go and make those kind of bilateral, multilateral deals abroad, and you have entered into certain engagements, this is what Parliament should be coming and looking at and saying, so let's interrogate what we have entered into. Let's see, what have we agreed, what have we signed, what's the impact of this? Parliament,
after we sign, is when we should interrogate.
It should actually be starting before, but Parliament has the job of putting checks and balances. It should not be telling the government what to do. It should also be looking and saying, this is what you have. Let's review it before you actually ratify it into Kenya. Let's review what this is. Parliament has not had this conversation before. It's not going to have this conversation after. And what Ndu is saying, that let's ensure that these things actually go and benefit the people this time round. The people who should be making sure that these deals benefit us are parliamentarians.
Well, okay. However, whoever is going to look at the implementation of it, what we are saying is that, look, the handshakes have taken place. This happened, and the talks are still going on in terms of what will done, or in terms of what will be done. We're not looking at perhaps we're looking at this is actually something going forward, and they said that we will go on into the future with you as a development partner. It's no longer in theory or myth, but this is actually something that is going to happen. It is already happening, and Russia has stepped in where, for example, on the continent, the U.S. presence has been waning at best, and if they're not giving their attention anymore, we're saying, yes, here are other options coming in from China, coming in from Russia, but Russia specifically so, because in the last week, over the last 2 years, they've been very deliberate about how they are going to spread their agenda. But I'm saying at the same time, here we have unique opportunities to be able to grow ourselves. And in this case, we should not let this perpetuate poverty, whereby we make agreements, maybe a few dollars exchange hands here and there, and then we don't do anything again to boost the profile economically of the countries that we live in. Now, the agreements that have been made with Kenya, we'll have some more detail about that, of course, over the coming days. But it has been clear that this is something moving forward, and they're going, with everything that they have and pushing forward and saying what we agreed on in Sochi, let's actually go and make sure that it happens. And it's not going to be, let's just have a discussion over coffee, but it's actually something that will happen. It will happen, and it's here. And so we're looking at now clearly the Russian wave sweeping across the continent, and it's touching Kenya too.
Now, what's interesting, if you look at some of the analysis that's coming post this meeting, Africa is, there's this rush to, people are vying to influence Africa. There's this competition. The US wasn't paying attention and Russia stepped in to fill a void. Of course, the US is our biggest donor, so still very much at play, or
biggest trading partner, actually.
Biggest trading partner. Now, why are we being viewed as almost the victim? And this is where we need to turn things around, where instead of people rushing in to influence us, we actually try and use the fact that there's actual options for a change.
Leverage.
And leverage on that. And this is the conversation we need to be having. But as Africans, and I've said it previously, unless we're unified under one strategy, and that can only be through the AU, it's too late to try and set up a body that could oversee all of this. I can't see that crystallizing in time to actually protect us from any exploitation. But we're not having these discussions as to how Africa could actually take advantage of the fact that we now have options, so that when we go and negotiate, we can actually play them against each other.
I think it's clear that we actually do play our state sovereignty one against the other, as opposed to working together as a unified bloc as African countries. We seem to have taken a competitive stance in that, yes, we've all gone and attended this meeting, for example, but let me see what I can do as Kenya, let me see what I can do as Nigeria, let me see what I can do as Rwanda for the benefit of my country, as opposed to going together as a unified force and saying, okay, we see that you're coming onto the continent, it's very clear that this is what your agenda is, but this is what we want. And it's very clear that that directive or that direction is not being taken at all. Too late in the running, perhaps, because now it's clear that what Russia is doing is increasing its footprint on the African continent in terms of its influence and what it wants to do economically. But Africa as a whole is not benefiting as a bloc. Again.
And Putin made a very interesting statement saying he supported the struggle of the people of Africa against colonialism, racism and apartheid.
That would be interesting to discuss.
It's 7:30. Good morning.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
Okay, let's see. Has anything changed? The skies seem to have opened in certain parts of the city, and it is raining, so the roads have become a little more slippery than they were earlier. So we're asking you to be careful, even though the traffic situation is not so bad all across Nairobi. Just be careful either way. All right. Coming off Mombasa Road, it is quite foggy, and you're being asked to drive with caution. Kiambu Road is ever so smooth this morning, so please do enjoy it while you can. Langata Road, people are actually driving recklessly because there is no traffic, and we've had, yes, one accident already, so please do be careful, folks. It is wet, there's not much traffic, so you do need to be careful so that you arrive alive. 0719012600 is the number to call. Tell us if you see anything that we can share information about, and keep you moving this Monday morning.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
In Mombasa, it's 87.9. In Kisumu, 102.5. Nakuru, 96.0. 96.7. In Eldoret, 90.9. Nyeri, Malindi 97.7 and 0719-012-600 are the numbers to call. Our hashtag on Twitter is The Situation Room. Siti Muga, before we went to the break, you wanted to react to what President Comrade Putin said.
Actually, the Russian influence seems to have been downplayed over the years because the Cold War as we knew it ceased to exist. But the biggest fight in Latin America was precisely that. Russia wanted control or had influence in places like Cuba and other places, and the US was struggling. On this particular continent, right, in fact, the history of Russia on this continent goes really far back, but it was mostly around Egypt. This thing started something in the 15th century. It's a long time, but the one we know of was when the first president, a gentleman by the name of Abdel Nasser, was a very close associate of the Russians. The Soviets had an input in Mozambique. The Soviets had a say. People associate Tanzania with China. The Soviets had a say. They were not loud. They were not as loud as some of the people, our visitors who came to visit us and decided that they owned us.
And they stayed.
Not those ones. Okay? But they've been here for the longest possible time. And part of the reason why we probably don't see it, remember, it was called USSR. So the expansionist habits made them acquire parts of the world that were not previously theirs. And with the Cold War ending and the Berlin Wall collapsing, they were busy trying to put things together or maintain the status quo, because people were just breaking off. Small states, people were pulling out.
Right.
So one day, now they have a semblance of stability because they have an understanding with some of these people. Remember, the Afghan war, Russia was right in the thick of it. So it's not as though they haven't been involved. They have been. But now they've gotten they're working at a new squeaky
clean persona perception,
Yes,
because it's always been the persona of Russia or the USSR, Soviet Union, has been dark, not really your friend, your neighborhood ghost, would it be, was kind of hiding in the dark, looking over your shoulder. That is the perception that people had of this country.
Actually, there was someone looking over your shoulder literally all the time.
All the time.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you changed your voice.
There was.
in that way.
When a country has an entire area and it's called Siberia, because I think they have one season. It's called winter. Okay.
Throughout.
Yeah. Well, it's not entirely true, but we hear of the cold in Siberia. So even when it's summer, it's cold. Where nothing but bad stories. Now, again, that could be a construct of the West, but it held. People talked about the Concorde, and it was a wonderful thing. They forget the Russians had the equivalent. It was called the Tu-144. But the West will tell you, this thing keeps crashing.
The Kalashnikov is also Russian. Is it a gun?
The gun.
Yes, it's a gun. It's a
AK-47.
machine gun.
It's a Czechoslovakian. Okay. The Kov bit.
No, you were right the first time. Please don't mind city. Czechoslovakia is a country.
Yes,
It was
it was USSR.
So
Yes, you're right, it was theirs.
Speaking of Russia and arms, of course, that's what they would be looking to trade with us, one of the things. And it then becomes dangerous, and I'm going to throw in something conspiratorial here, because if they're selling us arms, we've got to be at war. Or rather, the more war we have, the more arms we'll buy. We know at the moment that in the Central African Republic, they went in last year, and they claim to be providing weapons to help fight the rebels. And we know these sort of narratives that are woven in order to get involved in countries. Of course, Africa does have the most resources in the world. So you've got to be very careful as to what they want from us. They can look at us either as we're urbanizing very fast, in fact, the fastest in the world, and also in terms of growth, population growth, we're growing. So as consumers and a consumer base, we're brilliant, and they can foster that. But of course, what will they be selling us thereafter? And if it's weapons, you've got to be very careful, because if we're at peace, we don't need their weapons. So you start to wonder, would they start little wars and little sort of conflicts in order to sell their weapons? Now, that's the scary bit with Russia. And of course, this would be done without our knowledge.
But
so there's a rebel rising.
But it isn't just Russia. War has been a marketing tool for very many developing countries.
Oh, people have been profiteering from
for years, and the way it is, you foment
and
war.
Russia, now Kenya, or rather Africa, is being drawn into that.
But Russia...
By Russia, I believe... that's
well,
Russia's
we
primary goal.
already have the leaning towards of the Russian government, of the Kremlin, leaning on African countries in terms of asking them to put aside the tenets of the constitutions. And we had, cases of Guinea where they lean on that and say, look, we're essentially asking you to put aside your constitution and vote on other lines. For example, the Russian and the Guinean people, for example, are not really happy with that. However, but this is done, and it's not done in a quiet, kind of backdoor manner. It's open and it's clear, in your face, basically asking you to put aside your country's constitution. And this is a country that's doing this and basically saying, we'll give you this if you do this. And that's why I keep saying our eyes need to be open clearly and say, this is what they're essentially asking you to do, because we're essentially looking at Russian rule. So now we're saying, with these agreements that are being made, also be aware of what is coming in the back door.
You see, remember, a lot of the activities on this continent was to counter the US. Yeah, apart from just trade, remember they had their own bloc which they traded with, and don't forget the dreary, dark, and unpleasant circumstances that place just like East Germany. You're not going to go far. Hungary, Bulgaria, the state that they were in because of the association with Russia. The thing, though, that they had, these extremities where there were people who lived in abject poverty throughout, that they didn't actually have. You may have had poor people that lacked things. They, in many ways, were like China. You have a situation where you have all these people, and if that disparity continues, they'll die. So you have a system that at least affords them, yes, it does offer them some sort of equality. But remember, on this continent, we don't have bad memories of Russia.
We don't have any memories of Russia, do we?
We do.
We have the Cold
Have
War,
we had
the political pushes
involvement
between.
with Russia?
We do. What they did in those
With the
early days.
airlift, there was some people who went to Russia.
Not some, many.
Many people.
And that
went
was
to
when,
Russia.
we were sort of a proxy or a battleground for sort of East versus West, communism versus capitalism.
We focus on this country and we forget that they also had some businesses with Ethiopia. It's not that they were absent. They were just not loud. Remember, they had their
They were
own
never
satellites.
aggressive.
No,
That's
they were
what I
not.
meant
They
by
were not
memories.
aggressive on this continent because they were busy focusing on their
They were trying to
satellites.
sort out the
Yes, or
issues that
maintaining
happened
it,
after
keeping it there.
USSR. Yes.
But in terms of who is bad, there's nothing like that. They're all bad.
They're all the same.
They're all bad because if you consider the French, they watched and encouraged the genocide just next door here. Watched.
So, and perhaps even orchestrated it, but that's
Yes.
another story. So, why are we going to these countries? I know that sounds like a very basic,
Why don't we ask the
rudimentary
question? Why are our leaders taking us to these countries?
That's, in essence, what I mean.
They increase the trade ties. Come on, I mean,
No.
So
Can we not trade intra-Africa?
We
Do
can.
we not have enough?
We can.
I mean, these guys are looking at us as a consumer base. Why aren't we looking at ourselves as
And
a
we
consumer base?
not only that, we're looking at us as a stupid consumer base. People who don't think
I don't want to
very
say
hard.
that bit, but yes.
it's the trade ties. Let's listen to what the Russian President Vladimir Putin said when they were having those, bilateral talks with President Uhuru Kenyatta. So, of course, this is the Russian president speaking through an interpreter, and then you're going to hear the president of Kenya speaking without the interpreter.
Kenya for you.
Of course, our priority is the development of trade and economic ties, as well as ensuring a stable increase in our trade. In 2018, we saw an increase in the indicators. It was an increase of 1.2%. I refer to our bilateral trade. And we are very glad that some companies have managed to establish a solid position in the Kenyan market, and I do hope that we'll talk about that in detail today. Thank you.
Mr. President, I also believe that this forum you have organized offers, again, Russia and Africa the opportunity to focus on ways and means of expanding our political, economic, technical, cultural, and educational interests in a manner that serves both our countries and promotes Russia's partnership with the African Union.
So the president has mentioned the African Union. And if you remember the president when he took over in 2013, he said, our foreign policy this time is going to be how does it benefit us as a people? So if he maintains that, if he actually went to Russia with that same mindset that I'm going to look at how does it work for Kenya, not how it works for you, is how does it benefit us? He's talking about it economically, politically, culturally, socially. What benefits are we going to accrue?
So why don't we see the dangers that clearly lie underfoot? Why don't we see
There's
that?
danger.
Yes, there's danger, but
them?
it's weird. Do we see them? If we can sit here in this room and see that it's clear that there's clearly ulterior motive and that there's an alternate agenda apart from the flowery economic social justice benefit to the continent and the forging ahead of a partnership between Africa and Russia. Note that President Uhuru said Africa and Russia. So as far as he's concerned, there's a united front, which we can see that there clearly is not when it comes to dealing with partners like Russia, for example. If we can see that and it's open to us, why is it that those who sit at the table where these agreements are being made and then after now the results of these agreements are then being implemented, why is it that they are not able to see this? It's very clear. We have also, statements
What
being
makes
made.
you think they're not able to see this?
Did you hear what he said?
Yes. Remember, this is a politician speaking. One of the reasons why you find me jumping at the necks of politicians, it's not that they're stupid, ignorant buffoons. It's because that they're actually very knowledgeable. And that knowledge is actually being used to subvert the very things they're supposed to do. That's what's annoying. They know. They understand. They even know what to do, but they don't do it.
Okay. Let's look at South Africa, for example, with this whole Russia case. And we've actually had reports coming out of South Africa where there has been a leaning by the Russian government, by the Kremlin, through influential businessmen, to say that they would support the ruling party ANC. Basically, support means obviously put their money and might behind them during a recent election, to then have them take over from the Democratic Party essentially and be the majority in Parliament in South Africa. And of course that meant that later on certain initiatives then would be further deployed. So there's heavy leaning also politically, but this can only be done once they open up their hands and they say, here we have an agreement, for example, with nuclear and arms. We'll do that for you. But at the same time, there's a leaning from, and it's not directly coming from the Kremlin, but it's from people who then have a close relationship with the Kremlin and are also Russian citizens. Do you see what I'm saying? So it comes in the back door. Now I'm saying our eyes not open to things like this. So then they're also involved in how the government essentially is run. And it's not just South Africa that we're looking at. It's other countries. Looking at Guinea, we're looking at DRC.
And is it
we're
only
looking at the
Russia that
Central
we're
African
looking at?
Republic. We're talking about Russia now, and it's very clear that they have done this.
Is it only Russia that we're looking
know,
at? Because also...
Because they're the latest entrant. They're the latest entrant into the partnership agenda for Africa.
The people who gave Russia a foothold on this continent were the Americans and the West. Because of the way they did business. You're talking about South Africa. The West supported South Africa. That's why they're able to do the things they did. So who would the blacks and people in ANC turn to? Russia. What choice did they have? They couldn't turn to the West. The West was fully supporting the apartheid government. Fully. ANC has had friends within Russia. In fact, one of the tools that the National Party used in blacklisting the ANC in those early days, he said they were subversive because they were Russians.
They were Russians,
So,
absolutely.
The association Russians have had on this continent may not have been direct. In the olden days, when you heard that Cuba was exporting doctors, Cuba was a satellite of Russia, so to speak.
Remember the Bay of Pigs?
Yes. So all I'm saying is, Russia hasn't been loud about their influence. But again, this is how they went about their business. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't. You heard they had these scary bodies that could make you disappear literally. Yeah. In the middle of the night, we're living in broad daylight. You heard of these things. But part of the reason why the myth spread, because they were secretive. You didn't know much about them. Like, have you ever heard of a movie being made about the KGB by the Russians?
No, I think we weren't exposed.
Americans,
We weren't
right.
exposed to their culture, and they weren't looking to export it.
And they weren't looking to expose it either. The Chinese are the same. Now, look at how these countries have grown with their style of doing business.
Which is completely different from
The West.
the West and how they did business.
Yes.
Nduoko is saying, are we going into these conversations with our eyes half open? Are we not seeing the dangers that are lurking? Are we not seeing the hand that's being extended and what it contains? And also the deals that were made in Russia, in Sochi last week when the African leaders met with the Russian leaders. What kind of deals are they? And this time, did we actually go there with our eyes open? Are we going to get the full benefit of that? 0719-012-600. The lines are now open. Call in and join in this conversation. That's 0719-012-600. This is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. It's 13 minutes to 8 o'clock.
Spice up your life.
Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room on Spice FM. We're in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, worldwide on www.spicefm.co.ke and Spice FM KE on Facebook, and also on YouTube. YouTube is our channel is Spice FM KE. 0719-012-600. We're talking about Russia and the meeting that happened last week between African leaders and the Russian leaders. Good morning.
Well, I mean, again, we also had pictures coming out of Sochi last week when, Kenyan leaders were actually given a walk through the gallery, the gallery of arms, and basically were allowed to kind of, try some of this heavy artillery, as it were, to give them an idea of what it could be that their countries would use, or the weapons. It was just basically showing them what Russia could do.
Have you asked yourself why this particular gathering was not in the capital city?
Interesting enough, it
Remember,
wasn't. Yeah.
Even in the days of communism, one of the things that the Communist Party leadership had, there was around the Black Sea. They made sure that it was a nice resort where party leaders could go and sit and reflect and do constructive
retreat,
mental and spiritual regeneration and stuff like that. But 2014, when the Olympics were held, I mean, this is a serious resort. One of the things that they understood and did well, if it's a question of, and they didn't have the moral ambiguity that the West sometimes have. They didn't have it. Remember, they were religious-less. So these funny guilt trips that were nothing. They are not that different from China. They take you to a resort, and they understand the African leaders.
They overtake your senses first.
Man, they have you
Absolutely.
captive from the time
They
you
slay
land.
you nicely.
Yes.
I still think the West still
Phone
has a
lines
head
are open.
start.
Hold on, Jerry.
Go
Phone
ahead.
lines are open. I've got Kilan from Kisumu. Good morning, Kilan.
Oh, good morning, Jerry, Ndu, Siti Muga, and
Eric.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Killen, why are you looking for Eric's name this morning?
No. I just want you to guys, if you got a pen, put your pen on paper. I want to mention things and discuss on those lines. Yeah. One, don't forget that the president of Russia right now, Vladimir Putin, was an agent of KGB in Africa, and actually basically in Mozambique, Angola, and all those places. And there are documented facts about these guys, and the Russian presence in Africa in the struggles of apartheid, which the West has not wanted at any one time to be mentioned in the African history or in the global history. That is just an overview of how I look at it. I think in all the leadership around Europe and the world, somebody who has a direct documented background check of Africa in the global politics right now is Vladimir Putin. Apart from all these leaders, these are people who are informed about this. But Vladimir Putin was here himself, was on the grounds of Africa, So when you're addressing this, try and be a little sensitive. From where I sit right now, my house is approximately 3 kilometers from the Russia hospital in Kisumu, as popularly known. I think Fred or City can confirm that.
I can confirm, not your house, but the hospital.
Yes. So thank you for that confirmation.
You're welcome.
Get back to what we are talking about here. If you look at, let's go step by step. Let's look at the global economic structure, the global political structure, and the political trend. Number one, democratization against socialization. Socialization has proved that it's a better way of life than democratization of capitalistic thinking. And we have proof in hand that we see the economy of China being what it is today because of the decision they made and the consequences that followed. And we are looking at what is called capitalization in America and democratization. We are seeing companies are closing in all of America, in the United States of America, the apex of the so-called the dreamland. Every company, multi-billion companies are closing. So the same is not happening there. In terms of mineral, guys, you must agree with me that in Europe, the richest country in terms of mineral is Russia. They are the number one oil producers, the number one diamond producers, the number one uranium producers, and much more that I don't want to talk about. In terms of military hardware, you'd realize that today, as I'm talking to you, I'll say this so boldly, that Russia is superior to the U.S. in terms of military hardware. And
So,
in
so
terms
Killen,
of global
when African leaders are going to Russia to have these meetings and the kind of deals that we've seen, the news that's emanating from the meeting in Sochi, the question that Nduoko is asking today is: are we likely to actually see benefits coming to Africa, or is it all gonna go lean towards Russia?
Very good question. Very good question. One thing that you guys must realize here is that the Africa of today leadership that is going to Russia for this kind of approach are not going as the underdogs that went in the early 60s or in the 50s. You know, the Russian intelligence is as informed as African intelligence that there is more informed society in Africa today. And even if they are going their way blindfolded, it will not be the capitalistic way of the Western way of doing things.
So we're going to get our benefits out of this.
There's more benefits to this than the West.
Okay.
What are the benefits?
The benefit is technology. You realize what in those talks they talked about technological exchange, you know. And when somebody's talking about technological exchange, I dig back to history and look at what technological exchange have you done for other people. When the Russian government realized that America was conquering the world and they realized India was desperate, they went and brought technology into India, you know. As against American technology in Pakistan. Today, in terms of IT technology or even mechanical engineering and all sorts of things, economics, name it. Compare India with Pakistan. You realize one is a dwarf and the other is a giant.
So you're excited about this new partnership with Russia, are you?
The new partnership with Russia, I think it's something very, very important for Africa, and more especially Kenyans. We have tasted it.
And how can we ensure that we're not exploited by the Russians as Africans?
So the way we are doing it right now, we start talking about it, and the leadership will grasp this as we are talking it, and then they realize that we are not just a bunch of clowns who are going to dance for the queen or the king, you know. Yes, then we say it as we want it, that this is how we want it here, and this is how we should look at it. We should expect this by this time. We just give those terms and conditions. The government listens to the people when they talk in masses.
Do people understand enough about this to actually put pressure on the government for the government to do what the citizenry want?
A few people like me and you understand this.
Thank you.
And that's why we're having the conversation, so you can have more people understanding it.
This is the reason I'm telling you this thing, because one thing that I'll tell you, if you look at the kind of exploitation of minerals and even agricultural products, you realize that Russia will not extort from us. Russia is the world's number one oil producer, and they sell the oil outside Russia. America has oil in Texas, in California, and every other thing, but they buy oil. They don't sell. Who is fooling who?
Thank you very much, Killen. Killen, asante sana.
No, but thank you. That's very, very profound. That's very, very profound information. In fact, you've made me understand that the Russians did something that no other so-called Western country has done. They actually built a country and called it Patrice Lumumba University.
A country?
Well, they built a university.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Okay. Where?
In Russia. Yes. Named after Patrice Lumumba. Yes.
There was a tussle over influence in Africa.
Lydia, good morning.
Good morning, Spice FM. Good program today.
Thank you.
I wanted to add that buying military hardware is not good, because why should we kill each other? We should discuss and find a peaceful solution. Never spend money on guns and military equipment. Then number 2, nuclear is not worth it even for free. Look what happened to Chernobyl. In the 1980s, it exploded, and everybody had to be chased away because it was going to poison your water, poison the ground with your food. And up to now, nobody can live there. Is that great about nuclear?
Can be dangerous.
Then there was a
radiation.
Man, a pilot agreed to drive his plane to throw wet cement over the area. And after a few months, he died of leukemia. Is that great about nuclear? So we should not spend money on military equipment and not spend money on nuclear whatsoever.
Okay.
Just live on clean ground for clean water and clean food.
And clean energy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Lydia.
Well, nuclear is said to be quite clean energy, of course, other than the unfortunate events that can take place, like she mentions Chernobyl. But you do have the sort of environmentalists complaining that, yes, it's supposedly clean energy, but a lot of water is used, a lot of energy is used to run, to make nuclear energy. Absolutely. It's an interesting one with China, because should we be, Russia. Should we really be looking at buying weapons? Is that really what our focus should be? And I can see how Russia can, play us off against each other as Africans, because if Tanzania is buying weapons, you can understand why we would get paranoid
want to buy one. Yeah, exactly.
And we'd think, oh my goodness, well, for defense purposes, we'll buy weapons.
But
and then if we're buying weapons, Ethiopia will think, hold on a minute, they've bought what, 10? We want 20 of those.
But it's true. But this is true. This is what happens.
See again that our image of Russia has nothing to do with our dealing with Russia. It has to do with what the West has told us, telling us all these years.
But this is just
Russia.
Business sense.
And
if you're looking to increase your sales,
right now, the arms that have been bought by all these countries that you've mentioned are not from Russia. So where are they from?
No. Russia has put in, things like the armed? Central African Republic. Russia's given a lot of arms. Russia's recently sold arms to South Africa. In fact, I think nuclear weapons to South Africa.
Yes.
So you can understand neighboring countries will be looking at them. Which other countries
have sold arms to those countries? Which countries have sold arms to Kenya?
No, I don't know any of that. What I'm saying is Russia is looking to sell arms to us.
Ethiopia has the largest army in the region. Who has sold arms to Ethiopia? It's not Russia. Is it Russia that's number one?
Well, it's maybe
the other people who are selling
that.
are actually now just diverting our attention to the fact that they are also doing exactly the same thing. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. 0719-012-600. Join in this conversation. Something happened in Sochi, Russia last week. That's what we're discussing. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
No sooner had I said it than Bilateral and Mombasa Road have fallen in and the traffic is slow. It's not moving as fast as you'd like it to, but it is moving. Bumper to bumper situation on Bagavi Way, heading up towards the city mortuary roundabout. So we have a bit of a snarl up there. Everything else seems to be moving just fine. It's great for a Monday morning, so not going to dwell too much on it, lest it changes. 0719-012-600. Give us a call if you see something different that we should share. But for now, enjoy it. It's not moving badly. You'll get there in good time today, even if you woke up late.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It's 2 minutes past 8 o'clock. It's Monday. Good morning. And thank you for choosing the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, as your companion this morning. We're talking about the new Russia and Africa relations. And, well, one of the comments that was actually being made, just on social media was that we have 23 and above heads of state gathering in Russia for a couple of days for meetings, and this was something that you'd never have thought of in the 70s and early 80s.
It's interesting because
why? Because military coups that have happened. You leave your country, you come back, you are not the president. Who was this who was orchestrating all these coups? It wasn't Russia. We're talking about military weapons and all. they were actually being sponsored by other people and there were other players. The West was playing a lot in, overthrowing of governments and such.
You know what?
But sorry. I mean, if we're going to look at, saying it's clear that everybody was interested in this, because if you look at the 54 African countries, we had representation from 40. 23 presidents were in attendance. 17 sent representatives to this meeting. So literally, everybody was interested in having this conversation with Russia to see what it is that they could do with them. And if we're looking at what was top of the agenda was the moving of arms, or at least entering into, a weapons arms agreement, then we're also interested in it. And that's one thing we have to look at and be very clear. We as African countries, there's something we have taken interest in this. And if we know the top of the agenda is weaponry and arms, we have taken direct interest in it. We want to do it.
Do we need arms? Are we there?
That's
Should
the
we
question.
not be focusing on development?
But
somebody was saying we
see,
should have been looking at tractors and technology.
We should have, but we're
that.
assuming that the only thing that Russia exports
is arms.
It's not true.
There's much more.
I think that's their main export.
One of the biggest things that we're importing from Russia.
The people who import security, forget just arms, than anybody else is Israel. Is Israel. In Israel, the biggest security. Security. Security is not just guns. Security is everything that goes into ensuring a country is safe and prevents or escalates whatever it is to do with warfare. The greatest export that Israel has is that. Understandably, given where they come from, but also understand that the arms industry, Russia doesn't have a monopoly. Not really.
And it's trying to do that in Africa. And how else would you do it other than making us need and want those arms? Because if there's no need for them, they don't have a market. How are they going to create this need? By sending us into war and little conflicts.
No. That's conspiracy.
No. This is you wait and see. It's happening in the Central African Republic,
but they didn't
where
need
they're
the
now
Russians
coming
to do
in.
That.
They're now coming in and giving the government
Central
arms.
African Republic. Those areas. Let's start with the DRC. The problems that we've had in those areas from time immemorial, you've seen the Russians created it. It wasn't the Russians.
No, it wasn't them. But they can perpetuate it. They can come in and perpetuate it and grow it and expand it and make sure there's
and feed one arm of the conflict, for example, with weapons and armory.
That's what they'll do.
One of the ways of a government actually establishing itself as a secure state is to be properly armed militarily.
So are we a proper government as we stand?
In terms of technology,
or do we need to buy more arms?
We need to buy more arms.
We need to buy more arms. You don't think we need to buy more hospitals, more beds, more technology?
We also need
we need to buy more beds, more hospitals, and more arms.
Should the money go into that as opposed to arms?
The money should go to more schools, more hospitals, and more arms.
we don't need any more arms than we have. We're fine. But I was going to talk about this quest to sort of influence Africa and the VI, and it's really the US, the Chinese, and Russia. And I think, of course, the US have the upper hand. Well, they've managed to prime us with speaking their language. We sort of absorb their culture.
So it's not the US's language.
Okay, the English.
The Queen's language.
the US are also speaking.
They're also speaking some variations of the Queen's language. However,
but do you see either China or Russia, colonizing us to a point where we're actually speaking Chinese or we're speaking Russian? Because
Chinese,
you do see some signboards now in Chinese.
Yes.
And I remember one Chinese guy, I pointed it out, and one Chinese guy says, well, there's lots in English. And to him, it was just as absurd in terms of fact, why do we have signs in English?
If you talk honestly to anyone who comes from a country that considers itself a world power, everyone wants world domination. It isn't theory. They do. But the country that has spurred China on and is spurring Russia on has been America. That's the person they want to overtake, not compete with, overtake. Because
do you think they have America in mind in terms
they
of
do.
You think it's
yes, they do.
A competitive force?
I'm sure they regard the US as a huge competitor.
Don't you look at your competitor and ask, because that's the person who has a market you'd like to take over. America is central to their thinking. Do you really think that the USSR ever forgave the US for the collapse of the Berlin Wall? Because USSR thereafter collapsed.
It did.
Their sphere of influence went. Do you think they thanked them for it? Or do you think they forgave?
Especially Putin.
I don't think it was acrimonious. I'd need to look more into it.
In terms of the propagation
with the Berlin
in terms
Wall.
of the push for the fall of the Berlin Wall, I think so.
But these relationships are acrimonious. The reason why diplomacy exists is so that acrimony can be given a good face. If everyone just sort of like behave nicely, what do you need diplomats for?
Do you see our grandchildren speaking Russian?
My grandchildren speaking Russian.
Yes.
As opposed to?
As their national language, as opposed to English.
It's a national
Do you see that
language.
level of influence coming into Kenya? Let's say our great-grandchildren, rather.
These
so in the
people,
next
no.
100 years, in
not
3
really.
generations.
Colonialists never really want to do that. They want dominance rather. And this day and age, even with their evolution, they'd rather actually dominate you through your own things and your own leaders.
I don't think they're looking to influence then your
So it's a
culture
different
like
type
that.
of
It's a different
colonialism.
kind of colonialism in this case. And I
To
think
what
they
end?
also know that.
Dominance.
Well, it's dominance for them, and we're not
And
talking
our
about
resources.
and we're talking
Yes.
about dominance on a global scale, and also the recognition that comes with that. For others then who would essentially fall in line, and even if they don't fall in line, for you to be aware that hey, there's another big dog on the patch. on the
China
pitch.
pulled this same stunt and invited over 50 African leaders. Did you hear anybody complaining?
Nobody talks about it actually.
They
Nobody
seem
really
very
talks
happy.
about it. Yeah.
Our Kibaki went, came back happier. In fact,
They do that. Actually, even this, was it this year or last year,
Yes.
when President Uhuru Kenyatta went?
yes.
The guys that I see, doing it a bit different are the Japanese. And that's why I say, I think their style is honest
their
and it's
approach
open.
is- their
Theirs
approach is
we
actually
want to
quite
be trade
softer.
partners.
Their approach is actually quite softer, also because their intention is not the kind
It's
of
not dominance.
It is dominance, but it's not the kind of dominance that we see coming from these other countries. That kind of dominance is looking because they've already reached self-actualization on a national level.
No, it's
so what
not-
they're
no.
trying to do is help. They're really actually trying
No.
to see
No,
how
they don't-
much more they can push the development agenda to
they-
other countries.
Dominance, the Japanese don't have that dominance agenda, not really. Unless they're so good at it that they've hidden, but you can't see it. Look,
Theirs is more, I think from where they
You
come
think it's
from,
a more
their
friendly
value,
nature?
Their
okay.
value
Okay,
is...
let me ask you. You all know of USAID, okay?
Yes.
You've all heard of the
UK aid now.
Yes, it's not called UK aid. it's
DFID.
called
It was
DFID.
called
DFID.
DFID. They've
DFID.
changed it to
They've
UK
changed it
aid
to
Now
so
UK
that we
aid,
know
yes,
it's
yes.
the
From
UK.
DFID, to
Now,
UK aid, yes.
tell me, can you tell me one thing that DFID has done, that you know of?
They have the British Council who does training
Yes,
for
I can tell you.
corporates.
Tell me.
Education, support of the education sector.
For
This-
KIE,
this-
for example,
this
has received a lot
free
of
primary education that we rolled out. It was heavily funded by DFID.
Okay, what has USAID done?
the health sector. We're looking at some kind of support with Afya 1 and 2, for example, in Kenya.
And what did that achieve? I'm not saying they haven't helped, but I'm saying they've done a lot more than even what we're saying here. But if you look at the Japanese involvement, the Japanese came in with a solution and gave funding for the bridge across the ferry that we've been talking of. The restructuring of the port to make it viable for commercial use and to enhance the business, that was the Japanese. You've heard me talk about the 4 bridges that open up the entire coast. That was the Japanese. All the other fellows could have done the same thing. So
an entire university.
Yeah, and massive from beginning to the end. The Germans saw this light. The Germans now want to bring us and apply it. Now, when someone tells you these people have a development agenda, can you doubt it?
Oh, I mean, it's clear they have a development agenda.
Because you can see it.
And also where I was going with that is, if you see the Chinese meeting happened in China, the Russian meeting has happened in Russia.
There's been
The
no
Japanese
call.
have decided, let's actually
Do it here.
Let's come.
Yeah.
Let's come to where you are. This is because we are looking at it from, let's balance out the power. You don't feel like you're always coming to my place. Let's come to Africa. It was held in Kenya.
It was.
TICAD meeting was actually held in Kenya because their outlook of this thing is, we're looking for cooperation. We are looking for how we can work together. So to a mutual benefit. And we as Japanese have ABCD to offer. You guys as Africans have ABCD to offer. How can we trade? How can we be partners? How can we do ABCD?
Do you
And
know?
what leverage does Kenya have? What are we offering? Okay, geographically we're strategic. There's a port. What are we actually offering? What can we...
So we're talking business. Which country exports the largest number of equipment or vehicles to this country?
Japan.
Simple. It's not. You don't even. And once you think cars, you think spare parts. Once you think spare parts, you think industry.
And once you
And
see the
think heavy
development,
industry,
it
goes
once you
on
see the
and on
development
and on.
agenda that they've set, obviously in this country, when the time comes for more and more of this to come into the country, even if it's just the vehicular aspect of it, the doors will be open. The doors will remain eternally open.
It's not even the vehicles.
And that's
just
what
the
I was
heavy
saying.
Machinery.
There
Yes.
are other
For
things that
agriculture,
come in. Absolutely, there are other things that come in
Like some of
as
these
a
geothermal
result.
things and what have you.
There
All
are other
that-
things that come in as a result of them opening and paving those ways in the development agenda or the development
they
arena.
They could even be doing exactly what the other countries are doing.
But they're doing it
but the
softly
model
and
they've
silently.
used,
the model is different.
You don't oppose them. You feel, no, these guys are okay.
And they don't come in to tell you, oh, we want to interfere with you, we don't want to interfere with
your
you. They
politics.
don't deal with your politics.
No, they don't.
When they do the Sondu Mirio hydropower entire dam, they have done it as JICA. It's for some sudden benefit.
Oh, the Japs?
Yes.
They've put up a fertilizer factory. They're putting up a fertilizer factory. It's clear.
And what's their purpose? To what end do we get all this aid from Japan?
Well, one, see,
That's the
it's
thing,
the
they
equipment that they're
benefit in
bringing.
one way or another.
It's not complicated.
It's the equipment that they're bringing.
Grants by their very nature.
Is it a business?
It's business.
Definitely
it's business.
It's not
Definitely.
aid per se.
No, there are grants and there's aid. Please remember, aid, that's the one you pay. Grants is the one they tell you is free, but it's not really free.
There are conditions that you follow.
No, and it comes with their personnel. Okay? That's why I said, it's not that they're doing what the other people are not doing, no. But the way they go about it, you're actually
very sort of subtle about it.
You're happy with it. You feel, okay. These
And
are
even
good
the
partners.
quality of their work, to be honest,
Super.
it's very humanitarian. If you look at the roads, there's some roads in Kileleshwa, for instance, and you'll have a cycling lane, you'll have a pedestrian walkway as well.
They do.
And you won't find that with the Chinese.
No. But also the thing that I found amazing, I thought roundabouts were obsolete.
Roundabouts?
Yes. I'm talking about technology. You find they've given you 3 roundabouts in the same space where there's one massive one with some clock in the middle.
Yeah.
They've actually given you 3. So there's some traffic light, yes, but you don't necessarily have to look at the traffic light. There's this roundabout that can bring you from this road and take you around and take you elsewhere. This one in the middle that does the third one. You're saying, goodness. Some thought went into this thing.
Some thought actually went into this.
Yes. Whereas other people just give you this one big roundabout. And
sort yourself out.
And it's notorious. Every Saturday morning you find cars perched on top of it.
That's a whole conversation.
Others talk about helping you to build a road and then they pull out.
Yeah.
And they say, well, you have too many loans.
Yes. And the other people who can actually work with you to build that road.
Yes.
This is what they forget.
Yes. They forget everything that you have working for you.
Yes.
This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We've been talking about the relationship now between Africa and Russia, and especially where we stand as a country and as the African Union. And then how do we put in check what the governments have signed up? Are they going to be of benefit to the people? You can join into the conversation every time during the day. Hashtag the Situation Room on Twitter. And also you can comment on Facebook, Spice FM KE. That's where the conversation is happening. Good morning. It's 8:15.
Online, on digital, and on radio. This is Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
I like reminding you where we're broadcasting. So we are in Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa on 87.9. In Kisumu on 102.5. In Nakuru, we are on 96.0, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, and 97.7 in Malindi. Also, we broadcast worldwide as we live stream on Facebook every morning, Spice FM KE, on our YouTube channel, that is Spice FM KE, and also on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Our hashtag is The Situation Room. Big Monday, the 28th of October. Let's get right into it. This is Succession Mondays with Jerry's Crystal Ball.
Right, interesting one. And with the help, of course, of what's going on in Kibra, my crystal ball is actually now being informed before it informs me. So it's very sure of what it's telling me. Kibra, of course, is proving to be a playground that's going to be quite illustrative of what's going to happen in 2022. We're seeing some tussles, some overarching battles going on. For instance, you can see in the news, analysts are pointing out this is really a battle between DP and ODM, i.e. Raila. And there's a lot of other little battles going on. But one person that my crystal ball was talking to me about over the weekend was Oparanya, the governor for Kakamega. It's his second term. He's done very well in terms of developing Kakamega. He's very popular. But of course, this could be the person that finally unites the Western vote. Of course, Luhyas are the second biggest voting bloc. And it's because of the fact that they're not united that they never get a piece of the cake at the top, so to speak. Excuse my political terminology in terms of how flippant I sound, but it's just to make it easier for us to understand. I see Oparanya at the helm in 2022. In fact, I see him as deputy president in 2022. And I think he would be the guy to pick. I think he will actually be going against the DP if he's on the side of Raila at the moment, trying to rally up support in Kibra. He's the one that Raila brought in to rally up support in Kibra from the Luhya votes. Of course, there was also the candidate, the ANC candidate with Mudavadi, which, I mean, again, is indicative of how divided the Luhya bloc is. But I believe Oparanya could be the one to bring them together. He's got a lot of support. He's very well liked in that region, and his track record is fantastic. And here he is now coming into national politics before he's even a politician. Remember, this is his second term as a governor, so there was no going back. He's not going back to serve as an MCA. He's not going back to serve as an MP. From governor, the only way is up in terms of if you're looking for political power. So I see him as deputy president, running with perhaps Raila Odinga. And I think that would be a winning combination. If you just look at the numbers, that would be a winning combination.
So Raila as president, Oparanya as deputy.
Yes, we're working on the premise that there hasn't been a referendum and there is no parliamentary system. So we remain with the presidential system as it is, which is exactly what we have at the moment, basically.
Why would Raila give up on Mudavadi?
Well, he has already. He's brought somebody else in. You can see them fighting in Kibra. Mudavadi has a candidate. Raila has a candidate. If they were together, that wouldn't happen, because what Mudavadi is doing is actually splitting Raila's votes.
That may be so, but...
he's having to bring in Oparanya. Please come in and pull the Luhya community within Kibra. Come and talk to them. Now, Oparanya is the governor of Kakamega. By the time he's coming into Nairobi, he's now entering national politics. And you're seeing an endorsement from Raila. And we already know that the Luhya bloc is very easily influenced and lean towards Raila as it is. So if Raila is pointing at this man and saying, this is who I'm working with, we're working closely, he's supporting me, this is my guy, Raila is in essence endorsing Oparanya as the leader of the Luhya bloc.
Or maybe he's just using him to get that Luhya vote.
It could be, but that in itself will have the consequences of having endorsed him.
Look at the ODM rivals in Kibra, the Luhya. So we have the ANC person is, ANC is not, the candidate himself is not Luhya, but the ANC, the party leader is Luhya. Then we have, of course, McDonald Mariga for Jubilee. So we're just trying to see. Okay, so now that I can't bring in. But
what you're suggesting,
Musalia,
simply indicate that somebody had understood that the Luhya vote is a rich harvest
in Kibra.
Yes, that's Absolutely. Why Mariga is a Luhya, Wallo is a Luo. Yes,
but he's working with the Luhya.
Vote, but if you know very well there are many Luhyas in this place, why would you bring a candidate who cannot pull fellow Luhyas? So, but still. We've had divisions in this country, which are, and the divisions have not stood in the way of a greater political goal. Case in point, the handshake. The acrimony that followed 2017 elections, could you have foreseen the handshake? I'm simply telling you that the waters of politics should not be judged by the turbulent times that you see in it. No, they're just waters. They can
As
be.
They say in politics, one day is a long time. So you can imagine what 3 years is like. But in terms of the Luhya vote, everybody has been courting it because of the sheer numbers. It's just that it's divided. So right now you have Boni Halwale, shouting Ruto's trumpet on the streets, on Twitter, name it. You've got Wetangula elsewhere. You've got Mudavadi, of course, and you can see him going against Raila in this. So you can see he's not going to be Raila's point man.
He's done that before. And they've gone back.
They've come together as a coalition. Yes. But in terms of him being endorsed by Raila as the leader, he hasn't been able to rally around the Luhya community in terms of bring them together. And I think Oparanya will be the man to do it. He's very popular.
What is this that Oparanya will do that Mudavadi has
the
not
combination of Mudavadi and Wetangula did not do?
And this is it. The fact that no one else has been able to do it means that it's likely to now finally happen.
He may
in
very
terms
well
of
be introduced
probability.
national politics, but he was national politics before he's been a minister. Remember,
He was an MP, therefore he was a minister.
he was a minister. But
I think it's interesting to highlight why this is always a bone of contention. 10 years ago, the same unifying factor being looked for among the Luhya was something that, people kept talking about, whether it was bringing in Mudavadi under the NASA coalition at that time to then bring him in and use him as a point to then unify the Luhya. We're still looking at that now. Why has it been that this particular group of people have been so difficult to unify? And that we always had to have somebody to bring them in, and it was never a bone of contention with other groups of people, for example. And I think that's something that could be highlighted in terms of then why has it been so difficult, or rather why has it constantly been an issue whereby one individual pitted up against another needed to be brought in then to unify them. Perhaps we're looking at them as several blocks in terms of several different voting patterns, and not necessarily looking at them just by virtue of the fact that they're Luhya doesn't mean that they all have to vote the same.
Up until the time, even when Kibaki became president for the first time, the Kikuyu votes were also divided. Just so that you understand this.
So why was the highlight not so bright on them?
No. Well, the thing is this. The dynamics, the point I'm bringing, those dynamics are different. The Kikuyu vote have been known to galvanize around leaders at some point. The entire vote. The Luhya vote has not been known ever to galvanize.
At Kibaki's with Kijana Wamalwa, they all came around.
No, they didn't.
Kijana Wamalwa helped.
No, they didn't. That was the myth. They didn't. Because if you looked at the composition of that particular election period that we had there, it wasn't Kijana Wamalwa. There were Luhyas who had supported Kikuyu candidates. There were Luhyas who supported Raila. And those fellows were in one coalition.
So we got the impression
and there was a
that
vice
it was
president who was Luhya.
Luhya already. So and he was
coincidental as opposed to
before
causal.
even Wamalwa, there was Mudiawori. But he's somewhere. He different. All I'm saying is the factors that made the Luhyas vote are the very things we're discussing, in that different people representing different groups within the Luhya community were at the top. So it was very easy for them to coalesce at that time because they had a similar agenda.
And then was it then taken for granted that because they were there and with a particular agenda that they would get following from their people? And when I say their people, I mean the Luhyas.
That is something you can't take for granted in
you
that
can't.
region.
That's what I'm saying. So then
can't.
why then has it always been such a prickly issue? It's always been so prickly, especially for them.
It isn't.
And we have people, and we've had leaders across the board, always coming from the Luhya community per se, like you say, with a different political agenda or some kind of political sway that they did have. But then to get the people to rally around them as a block, one unified block, has always been a prickly issue.
They're a sexy block. Everybody's chasing them.
That's
I'll be honest to that. And I think
what is
Ruto,
it about
it's
them?
a touch of genius with what he's done in Kibra by introducing a Luhya candidate, because he splits. Because usually also they sort of move along with the Luos when it comes to voting. And by introducing Mariga, you're splitting that sort of friendship between the Luos and the Luhyas, even at a national level, perhaps. And of course, and in turn, absolutely, if you're a Luhya, you're likely to vote Mariga in Kibra.
No, it doesn't work that way.
How does it work?
For instance, you assume that just because someone has been a governor, that the populace will automatically accept that this is a man who is now slated for national leadership. It doesn't quite. The possibility exists. But I'm telling you, the dynamics of the voting populace and the way they think doesn't quite work. I'm going to explain to you how I believe it works.
Tell me.
One, they decide this party that we are supporting, who is the leader, okay? If they feel strongly for that particular leader, then that person's candidate has a very good chance.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, when you talk about Luhya, you have to ask within Kibra, which community among the Luhya is more dominant than the other?
Among the Luhya,
Yes,
in terms
yes.
of
People come from
Maragoli
around
and so on.
Maragoli, Kakamega, what have you. Now, if you look at the Maragoli, many of them support Raila.
Right.
And that's Mudavadi's backyard. The Kakamega area, they were always split. You had people who liked Matiba, there are people who then liked Moi. Now, they brought in New Ford Kenya, people like Halwale joined it. That particular vote has been fragmented. If you look at the Bukusu, they have been a fairly unified vote until now, the Moi era, when they started splitting it. And they split it very nicely. And Uhuru has taken over, And even that particular vote is still split. Now, that's Ford Kenya.
So you're saying this split exists even at a micro level like
Yes.
Kibra, where they're
Yes.
outside of their
Yes.
home,
Yes.
and they're actually in a community
Yes.
whereby other factors should bring them together.
Yes.
So it's practically impossible to actually bring the Luhya vote into one block, even in Nairobi.
The way you do it is there'll be someone who'll get the bulk, meaning he gets a piece from everyone, so his bulk becomes bigger, and then there'll be other people among the Luhya who move towards him in a greater degree.
I think
so.
what
The
you'll
person who wins
find
the
is
Luhya vote is the one person who can attract all these factions.
And what you'll find as well, they'll consider Raila's candidate as an external enemy, and they'll actually, as a result, coalesce as one. It could actually bring
No, they
them
won't.
together as a block because
They
they're
won't.
against somebody. They're coming together against somebody.
Jerry, they don't consider
if Ruto
Raila
can
an
convince
enemy.
them, if Ruto can convince them of that, then Mariga could win.
If you say that, then that's a discussion point. But they do not see Raila as an enemy.
No, they don't. I mean, I'm talking about what is the narrative that's going
If
to be
someone
in the
managed
campaigns.
to successfully paint.
And this is why I'm saying it was a touch of genius by Ruto
You
to
see
bring
the-
in a Luhya candidate and divide that vote, because the Luhyas will all coalesce around this candidate,
You know
and
the
Raila
discussion-
will be the enemy.
The discussion that I was having in central Kenya, in Karatina, with these friends of mine, they were telling me that some people, of course, not everyone came from Karatina. We had people from Kiambu, Githunguri.
What were you doing there, just out of curiosity?
I went to visit.
Right.
When I was introducing it, you weren't here. I went to visit my former headmaster
All right.
with a group of people with whom I was in Form 1. And so it was a collection of people. But there were people from Kiambu telling me that, people don't seem to understand that Ruto is actually gaining traction.
He is.
And other people said, actually, you may not have thought so, but he's actually
He
gaining
really
traction.
is, and he's been courting Western Kenya.
Yes, so I asked him
Mariga.
the question. So if it's gaining traction and we're in 2019, will it still have traction in 2021?
If it continues on the same trajectory.
Yes. And someone said, the way things are going, he can. I said, okay, so let's pause. Have we had a situation like this in history, where in this country, where someone seems to be gaining traction, and come the election, something very different happens? And I left my discussion there.
And who was that?
Sorry?
Who have we had in a similar
No, I didn't have
situation?
anyone in mind.
I'm asking. Have
I
we
was
had
looking at the
anybody
academic. Oh, yes, we've had.
in terms of history?
Yes, we've had.
Educate us. Who?
Whether the state arm comes into play, we saw it with Matiba. We saw it.
Matiba gained traction 3-4 years prior to the election, and
Matiba was a very popular leader. Very, very popular leader. That was the truth of the matter. He was.
and actually he was made to think he was a lot more popular than he was as a strategy, because that divided
now that
and
is an
made him
argument.
run for presidency.
If we go along with the argument, then I will say in 2007 Raila was more popular and actually won the presidency. If I go with the argument, and I'll buttress it and say he had more MPs than everybody else.
No, in terms of
I am saying
Matiba,
if I use your argument, you can't use it for the Matiba case and then say it couldn't apply elsewhere. This is what I'm trying to tell you.
No. It was actually a strategy by the people in power.
It can't have been at that time, and it didn't work again.
I'm not saying, and you can bring that up later. What I'm trying to explain is how Matiba was given the sense that he could be president, and he received a hero's welcome when he came back from treatment in the UK, and there was people wearing shirts saying Matiba for president, and that's why he actually pulled away from the opposition party at the time, which was Ford, and created his own party, thinking he could win because he was given that
pulled
impression.
away from that
but
party
all that
before
was
he
an
even came back,
orchestration.
Jerry.
All that was an orchestration of the current leadership, or of the then leadership.
Jerry, he
Absolutely.
pulled away from that long before he came back to the country.
I'm
He'd
opening
come
up
back to the country a number of times.
The phone lines are now open. 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. Succession Mondays, Jerry Thorne says, Oparanya
Is the man to
is
watch.
the man to watch. Vice President, Deputy President to Raila Odinga in 2022. What do you think? It's 8:30.
There is spice in everything nice. Everything nice.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, looking much better when you are on Jogo Road this morning at about 8:30, getting towards the City Stadium roundabout. City Stadium roundabout. It's the Luhya influence.
We understand we've been talking about the Luhyas. So if the stadium becomes the stadium, it is okay. We get you.
Right, so it's not so bad in that area. You understand. You understand? Okay. Looking at what's happening in other parts, Mombasa Road had become a bumper-to-bumper situation, and it's getting better. Valley Road, Arwings, Kodek, getting into and out of the city, also flowing absolutely smoothly. It is a traffic dream this morning, except for those two roads. Ngong Road looking absolutely clear. We had an issue with Bagathi Way this morning, but that is getting a little bit better. Other people have issues not with the traffic, but with the state of roads. And the governor of Nairobi is being called out in several areas because now we see potholes all over the place that would cause traffic even when there are few cars on the road. Anything else? Give us a call. 0719012600.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
28 minutes to 9 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We have Jerry Thorne, C.T. Muga, Nduoko, and I'm Eric Latif. Today is Succession Mondays. Jerry Thorne's crystal ball is... actually, this time it has also been informed, but it's saying that Wycliffe Oparanya, the governor of Kakamega...
He's definitely the man to watch. Of course, he's been in government before, but very importantly, he's very well respected, very well liked, and has done a lot for Kakamega, and it's been very well publicized as well. But now, Raila has brought him into the fold when it comes to Kibra, and I said Kibra is the litmus test for a lot of what's going to go on in 2022. At the moment, it's the battleground for Ruto and ODM Raila.
But let me ask the question, Jerry. If you're talking about a part of our Kenyan community who've had a history of very independent thinking and very independent political associations, why would they suddenly want to give up that? If you say Oparanya hold that position, I see a situation where others, Luhya communities, opposing him and not necessarily supporting him, because if he can get that job, they'll say, but and why can't they?
But why not me? There's also the other dynamic that I see. If you put the Raila-Oparanya combination, it may be viewed by the rest of the country as this is a Western thing. And I think that's the reason why it wasn't actually, he wasn't picking Musalia or what's the Ford Kenya? Moses Wetangula. He wasn't picking that. So he was going with the Kamba. This is in the name of Kalonzo Musyoka. So that you just show that this is not a Western Kenya bloc. This is all-inclusive, but also we still have Luhya leaders.
There's something CT says all the time. I try not to amplify it because it's politically incorrect, but I'll use it in this instance because it suits my needs, which is that there's 3 important tribes in Kenya. When you say important, 3 tribes that play a serious political role.
And I use the word tribes, important.
I don't know if the word is important, but you allude to important. I've forgotten the exact word, but those are semantics.
I'm careful with my semantics, especially where politics concerns.
Semantics.
I'm very
you say there's 3 prominent, is that the word?
Prominent
perhaps? Okay. 3 prominent tribes, and that's the Kalenjin.
I usually say communities.
Communities, sorry, yes. My bad. Communities. Are we okay so far in terms of
good.
lingua?
We're fine. We're fine. We may proceed.
This political correctness is curbing my style, but 3 prominent communities, and you talk about the Kikuyu, the Kalenjin, and the Luo, and that's even historically in terms of who's had power in this country, that has been the case, and a community doesn't go without its benefits when a certain individual is in power from their community. History has shown us. Now, if we bear that in mind, and we know that 2 of the communities have been at the helm through and through, you can see why it's okay for them to be out of the mix. The Kikuyus have said themselves, we don't need to be at the helm. We don't need to be there. Actually, let's give it 25 years. Now, so you can see the Kikuyus would happily support Raila and Oparanya. Now, the Kalenjin, of course, they still have their tussles in terms of between Ruto and Gideon. The leadership there is still being contested.
Isaac Ruto doesn't feature in this thing.
No. I think he would be behind Gideon. Ruto, Mandago, I think they would fall behind Gideon. But I think Gideon would actually be the sort of leader there. That's my
crystal
take.
Ball speaking.
This is my crystal ball telling me everything.
Carry on.
So... In terms of that, and then if we then take that the Luhya is the second biggest tribe, I don't see too much of a backlash by the Luos and the Luhyas being in power as president and deputy, given that Luo is one of the prominent communities, as CT puts it, and then Luhya is the second biggest community with the biggest community, not actually
are you saying
throwing up a fuss.
If I didn't say it, they wouldn't be prominent.
It's just the way you put it. It sounds better. It sounds better than if I was to say
Wait
it.
a moment. Why are you paying me compliments? So many compliments.
I needed today. I needed to use your argument
in one phrase.
I needed to use your argument.
I'm waiting.
But no, I do see what you're saying. They could say that there's too much power vested in Western Kenya. So that's an interesting one.
Politically,
and maybe,
does it sound?
And maybe make Kalonzo speaker. He keeps being offered this position and he refuses it. So maybe make Charity Ngilu Speaker of the House. And there you have it.
No,
the balance
but
is there.
You have the governor of Machakos who's telling them, look, guys, see me.
I'm running for the top seat.
Yes,
we need a woman as well, I think.
Okay.
At the helm. It's about time.
Okay.
Yeah. So we would have Raila as president, Oparanya as deputy, and then Charity Ngilu as Speaker of the House. This is if we retain the presidential system that we currently have.
I want to go to your crystal ball, Jerry, and I want to find out if it talks beyond personalities and goes towards issues.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, let me just ask, and
because
maybe now
it's Kenyan.
Maybe now
the
because
crystal
it's
ball is
Kenyan
Kenyan.
crystal ball, so it doesn't. Okay, so let's assume
it doesn't look at issues.
Let's say that this crystal ball was living somewhere else. Okay,
Right.
hop, skip, and a jump away from Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think then that Oparanya, having been brought in, would be brought in then to influence that bloc which they were looking to gain votes from because of the fact that he's done so well in Western Kenya, which was clearly an issue-based performance?
Mm-hmm.
And they say, look at what he has done in Western Kenya. This is what someone like him, with our support, would be able to do in Kibra. Do you think that is what was being brought in? It was just a personality.
He was being brought in to neutralize the Luhya factor that Ruto has capitalized on to take away votes from Raila. And I thought it was a brilliant move by both Ruto. I mean, these are brilliant politicians. One is a seasoned politician. How long has Raila been in politics? Since the 80s? 1982 is when I first remember of his first major sort of escapades
over 30
in politics.
Years. I mean, we're looking at a 30-year performance.
Almost 40 years he's been in politics. So he understands this game very well. And then, of course, Ruto is the master of politics, and he learned from the professor of politics. And you can see, I mean, it's a genius move, very Machiavellian, to bring in Mariga into this fold, because, of course, what it does is split Luo and Luhya.
May I change the discussion slightly?
Go ahead.
This by-election is being made into Deputy President Ruto and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga.
Political pundits will pick that up, yeah.
Yes, but that's what's been told to the public throughout. And they've taken it further and said if ODM were to lose, then Raila's powers would go down.
Influence.
And power is what exactly? Eric, my brother?
Influence. Political influence.
Okay, all right, fine. Political influence. Langata was won by Jubilee. How did that affect Raila's powers?
Langata was never quite Raila's backyard. There'd been some contention, and there's been, he did have the previous MP, and he's had it for a while, but I think Kibra is the masses. I don't have the facts, but he's not always had it.
No, he didn't. With Madai had it before him. Biki had it before then. Yes,
so there's been.
But he's had it for decades.
This is telling. It's indicative. It's more indicative. It's like a poll.
When Langata was split between Langata and Kibra,
yes,
it was clear where Raila's influence was left.
Yes,
it was in Kibra.
Yes,
not Langata.
No. Where the large voting bloc was.
It remained in Kibra.
Yes, it did.
He still won. ODM still, immediately after it was split, ODM still won Langata initially.
The question I am asking, in fact, let me extend it further. ODM,
how did that affect
ODM lost
influence?
in Embakasi. They lost in Ugenya, Raila's backyard. How did it influence Raila's power?
How did it affect Raila's power?
Yes, negative, because positively is not the discussion. Negatively, how did it? How did those things affect him?
I think the reason I call it the litmus test is because I think Kibra is a big Luo area, and if somebody can come and take away Raila's power, it's very telling. So with this, for me, it's like a poll. I'm not saying that it's going to diminish Raila's influence in any way, but I think it starts to indicate that there's a change coming, and that Ruto can actually mobilize people towards him and away from
That's what
leaders.
Has been said, and I'm asking how exactly does it happen, because You see, for someone's power to diminish, it means then that person is not able to do the things he's been able to do on the national scale. Remember, you're talking about a man who's lost 2 presidential elections. 2. No, sorry, 3.
Presidential elections.
Yes, 1997 first. I'm getting my arithmetic
97, 2007, 2013, 2017, 4. And then there was 2 in 2017, 5.
Now, Jerry, now you've gotten my point exactly. Did his power wane? Did it wax or did it increase?
See, you keep telling us it's about perception. All right?
I do.
Right. Now, this perception, if Raila's home ground is Kibra, because that's his home ground, what are the other places where he has extended political weight? This is where he's actually gone and campaigned himself in person and won the seat himself in person. If a place like that, where it's his base, if he loses to a competing candidate and or competing political party, which has been campaigned for by a competing political party openly, then the perception is that he has lost the influence on the ground. And that's why when you talk about the other constituencies that you've said, which ones? Embakasi and Ugenya. He didn't lose to a different political party. It was still the same kind of vibe. If he had lost to Jubilee in Ugenya, or if he had lost to another party, KANU in Ugenya, it would be telling.
So it's, as you say, it's about perception.
It's about perception.
And maybe you'll see he'll have reduced votes. His votes will be reduced.
But
politics is perception.
Oh, it is today, is it?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's good.
It's perception.
It's perception.
Good.
It is today because you've been saying
and if I were to say that what you are saying again is perception, then you know what?
No, what I'm saying is verbal. I'm talking. I'm telling you.
Yeah, tell me about a perception.
Yes.
And that's what
but it's not perception.
What is it?
It's I'm telling you that perception is perception, or politics is perception. But it's not a perception. What I'm telling you is not a perception. It is a fact.
There's something serious.
I don't even give opinions. I give facts.
There's
Yes,
something
you know that.
Here. You're lost for words.
Yeah, it's
Me?
It's a phenomenon like the Bermuda
word,
Triangle. Cannot really be explained, but this is the manifestation physically.
No, perception is perception.
Physical manifestation
but of course,
of a
because it's
vacuum.
perception. You think I say no? This perception is now fact. Jerry.
No, if you had
What
followed,
happened
if you had
this weekend,
followed,
guys?
if you had followed,
Between Eric and Jerry, there's something.
No. What happened?
If you had followed, you'd have understood.
Did you go for some church meeting?
perception or
Went
not.
to church. There you go.
So I think maybe we put it out to the audience. Is the Luhya factor an issue in Kibra? And is that why Ruto brought in a Luhya candidate? And is Raila having to neutralize that by bringing in somebody who is prominent, well-known and well-liked from the Luhya community in Oparanya?
Because he had no one else. The other liked people are all against him in this particular race.
Well, I think Mudavadi, Ruto must have paid him to bring in a candidate. That's
No, the phone lines are now open. 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. It's Succession Mondays. This is Spice FM, the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
And then, of course, he had some stone-throwing youths disrupt the ANC Kibra rally, which I believe actually was the Jubilee faction, but making out that it was ODM that was stoning them. But so there's a lot of intrigues in this. I don't know how you, CT, can look at the situation and look at the dynamics and actually not see sort of the overarching or underlying political games here that apply to national politics.
Why do you think I don't see them?
No, you just said, does that mean anything? And what? No, you say, what consequence does that have? Does that change anything?
You see, this is you reconstructing what I've said. At what point I said it means nothing, because that's what you suggested. I didn't say that.
What you
My
were
question was,
I didn't
insinuate. I asked. Is a caller coming in?
Yes, this is Ben in London, Nakuru. Good morning, Ben.
I was going to say.
I like how you threw in Nakuru.
Hi, the panel. Good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
I'm good. Thank you for the discussion for today. But I somehow differ with I don't need Jerry or Ru that Obaranya is the key person for the Luhya. But I was talking to a gentleman from that region that we should never delete or a factor that is now the Modavati is a key player there, and Modavati and Waitangula. So the combination for those two people will bring a great impact in that region. But the problem now is that we cannot. When you look at the politics of Kenya today, it is a gradual. It's a gradual development. And when you look at somebody like Modavati, who was once a vice president, okay, that is a maturity in politics. So we cannot rate him now in the issue of Kibra, because now the playground is not actually, I can tell you, is not clear, not good for everybody, because they are using violence. Let's give everybody a playground where they can sell the policies and so on and whatever. So for now, still, we cannot rate out Modavati on the issue.
We can't. He's shown up a number of times on my crystal ball, but it changes occasionally. Let me ask you, while we have you on the phone, what sort of influence does Raila have over this Luhya bloc that we're talking about?
You know what is happening now? The trust that the Luhya had before
with Raila,
with Raila, can at least. But now people are opening their minds, they are opening their eyes. They are seeing now we are lacking behind. We are not getting. For example, let me give you a good example. I'm Kalenjin. Okay, 2007 we voted this guy, and we came down and we say we are not benefiting at all, and that is now we retreated, went to the Kikuyus now, and we emerged victorious. And this is a person, he can give you a promises, at the end of the day he cannot fulfill. So this is now Kenyan's politics.
Who are we referring to? Who doesn't keep promises?
Yeah, Raila.
And which politicians keeps promises?
We have like
simple one. Which politician keeps promises? Just one, not two. One.
Now, let me give you an example. Like those who are trumping for, I have a good number of friends who supported Ruto ambition for 2013, 2019. They are in government now. But now I have a very good, like the Minister of Water. He was a very great friend. He was a great. He
Careful, you don't get him in trouble.
No.
Was his position a reward?
I'm telling you the truth, the picture. Let me give you the picture, because now the fact that we are talking about politics, there are also some facts in the ground. So what is happening now? The Luhyas, they are opening up their minds, and they are seeing now the direction where they are going. So things will be different when we come to 7. Even though Jubilee will not win the election in November, they will shake that place, and it's a signal that somebody's politics is vetting tremendously.
If I were to go with your argument and ask the question, these promises that Raila hasn't kept, which are they?
There are many. For example, let me give you an example. The issue of the Prime Minister when we came 2007. Who was supposed to be the Prime Minister?
I don't know. Tell me.
There was somebody who was supposed to be Prime Minister, but he took it. And after what he given the minister, and he chased away from that to the world. So we know those are the things people know in the ground. So the politics of Raila is now, I'm seeing it's fading slowly.
Ben.
Interesting. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for that.
Thank you for your contribution. Norman in Kisumu, good morning.
Good morning, Fiti, you and Eric and Jerry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, so you know the problem with the supporters of William Ruto is that they have always felt that in 2007 they were shortchanged, but they don't know that their leader is always too aggressive and selfish. So their leader, if maybe William Ruto would have been deputy president, for example, maybe that is what he wanted in 2007. Maybe even Kibra, he was made deputy prime minister, would have felt short-changed. So it is a
Norman, your line is
terrible. But I think what Norman was saying
Lydia
there is
before you come in, Lydia.
Yes, hello, Spice
Hi.
FM.
Hi, good morning, Lydia.
Hello. I also would like to talk about this Kibra. It is filled and filled and filled with people to count votes, not for you to live properly, but for you to give your vote.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them who are standing in Kibra, their bosses are Kanu. That's it.
Their bosses are Kanu.
Starting from Raila, all their bosses are Kanu. That's it.
Okay,
because it's the biggest number for elections.
It is highly densely populated, no doubt about that. Interesting one about the Kanu.
Lydia, I love your perspectives. They are completely left field. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, today I'm happy. Mm-hmm. And I'm calling from home.
Mm-hmm. Is it raining in Nandi?
Yeah. Yes, it's raining.
Good.
Yeah, though the weatherman normally lies to us because now we can see that the rain is just disappearing. Short rains now.
Niambie.
Yes, your crystal ball Njeri today, I will put it a probability of half.
Mm-hmm.
If with the current system, that position cannot go for Baranya.
Mm-hmm.
Because this thing will look like the way Eric and I don't know if the CD or who have told you that it will look
Eric,
like.
He said it will be weighted too heavily in Western.
Yeah, it will be like Western Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of if we will have another structure whereby we will have a ceremonial president and the prime minister, the prime minister, I think Obaranya will be a big man to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Because I tend to believe even that Obaranya is more popular even than Mudavadi.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is a person who rallies behind other leaders like the outspoken Atwoli.
Mm-hmm.
Atwoli and Obaranya speak the same language.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Western region is still, by the way, a Raila zone or the ODM zone.
Mm-hmm. So this is a big endorsement to Oparanya.
Yes,
with Raila taking him into national politics publicly.
International, and I see him being a deputy prime minister because remember these people have that position before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I will see him as being a possible deputy prime minister in Raila's leadership or the campaign or the campaign brigade.
So you don't see Raila and Mudavadi working together again?
No, there is no possibility. If there was a possibility, you could not see that when Owalo decamped from ODM to ANC, the person who welcomed was
the party leader. Yes.
Okay, let's look at this leadership under the parliamentary system, because we've agreed before. Last week we agreed on Charity Ngilu with the parliamentary system. So we'd have Ngilu, Oparanya, Raila,
yes,
and
we will have Hassan Joho as deputy president.
Joho.
And I will see the Kikuyu.
I was going to say Mount Kenya representation.
Yes, let me say the Mount Kenya representation stepping for a ceremonial president.
Not Raila.
And no, Raila will go for a prime minister.
Raila will be head of government.
Raila will be prime minister.
He will be head of government.
With two deputies.
They are deputy. Now we have Iangilu and Anwa Ikuru. And I think here it will be game of numbers. And by the way, Raila might choose to play harder cards on Ruto by giving the Mount Kenya region the ceremonial presidency and deputy prime minister because of the numbers. Because I think the IBC will be made in a way whereby you will have to declare like the way we select
your lineup in advance.
Yes, your lineup in advance. So having this as a Mount Kenya having as a rich block of constituencies, even if we go to parliamentary system, they have a lot of constituencies.
Kiraito Murungi, you don't think he'll be in the mix?
No,
or he'll be on... Okay, so this would be one... So Raila, Joho, Ngilu and Oparanya would be one party as a foursome.
Don't forget Waiguru.
Waiguru would be...
Remember, Waiguru has been coming for BBI. And campaigning against the Punguza Musiko. While Ngilu is silent, Ngilu is concentrating on
her county.
On development.
Mm-hmm.
So Kenyans are watching those who are playing national politics. Yeah. And having these people with them, I was saying that because they have a lot of votes and constituencies, they will demand for 2 positions. And they will go for it. They will have a president and even the deputy prime minister.
How about the Raila camp also making a foray into Rift Valley? No person at all.
It will be very hard because the only thing which they can promise you can because you have Ruto factor here, and there's no way you will entice Gideon with a big position and leave another tribe which has nothing.
What do you mean another tribe?
As per the numbers, that's why I've said the coast region, the western region, and the Mount
Kenya region.
So if you give Gideon Moi, the person who doesn't even by the Gideon Moi, he has no support in Rift Valley.
Oh, I beg to differ. We've had this discussion before, Yegon.
Yes, we've heard, but I want to ask you.
Because if Ruto only has, we hear 12% in the Rift Valley, who is the other 88% going to?
Jerry, have you seen Gideon Moi going to Trans Nzoia?
No, they're called the silent majority.
Rift Valley and Nandi County was an issue. Have you seen him?
He's got his supporters. We can't discount Isaac Ruto of Ruto Double T. We can't discount Mandago. Those are all supporters of Gideon Moi.
Remember, Isaac Ruto will be going for governorship in 2022.
So
and he knows why he lost. He lost it because he was opposing the deputy president. And I don't think he will repeat the same mistake.
Okay.
Okay, we'll discuss Rift Valley politics next week. But for now, do you believe that it was a stroke of genius for Ruto to put in a Luhya candidate in Kibra?
You know, when we had Owalo, Owalo is a Luo. He has been in ODM, and now he's in the ANC, which normally we assume as, though ANC is not clear if it is a Luhya.
By the way, not just in ODM, he was close to Raila.
Yes, he was
one of the advisors.
Yes.
So for Ruto putting a Luhya here, he knew that now this Luo voting block, having known what Owalo did to them, they will have a divided votes. That is why they are trying to divide that votes. And now here you see Obaranya coming in with his Maragoli and Cabra's people that you should vote ODM. We have seen Gideon endorsing Imran. So it will be a big fight in Kibra.
Asante.
Thank you, Yegon. Speak to you soon. Thank you.
Well, Jerry Thorne's crystal ball this morning is showing her that Wycliffe Oparanya, the governor of Kakamega County, the chairman of the county council of governors, is a man to watch in 2022. And she's saying him, if we go with the current political situation of president and deputy president, Oparanya would be Raila Odinga's deputy presidential candidate. And they're likely to win, according to Jerry Thorne. What do you think? 0719-012-600. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
Okay, it's been advised that if you're stuck on Langata Road, which you probably would have been because there seems to be a heavy snarl up there, that you should actually miss road and enter Kibra. Everything seems to be happening in Kibra because the roads are clear as well this morning. So use that as an option and you'll get to town in less than 15 minutes if that is where you're headed. So piece of advice this morning. All eyes seem to still be on Kibra. On Langata Road, it's worse than during school days, unfortunately. The jam starts all the way at Bomas of Kenya. And so generally, the cause of traffic in Nairobi is the schools being opened. Now, schools are closed, but we have more traffic than usual this time. We also have some traffic now that has built up on Wayaki Way, unfortunately, and it's going to take us some time to get out of it. Now, this is construction combined with the wet roads this morning. That's what it looks like. Nothing else out of the ordinary. Getting off Jogo Road was a breeze, as well as some parts of Mombasa Road, where we still have some traffic in other parts of the city. We'll let you know how that changes as we go along. Don't forget the numbers to call. It's 0719 012 600.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Good morning, and how are you doing? We are broadcasting in Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa on 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. We're also on Facebook, Spice FM KE, on our YouTube channel, that is Spice FM KE, on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Reach us on Twitter, hashtag The Situation Room, and also can call us this morning, 0719 012 600. Today being Succession Mondays, Jerry Thorne's crystal ball is showing her that Wycliffe Oparanya, the governor of Kakamega, is the man to watch in 2022.
Yes, I think it would be naive to underestimate that move by Raila to bring him into the national politics platform. That arena is crucial. I know, CT, you've said that perhaps it has no consequence, but I think it's very indicative of 2022 politics in terms of alignments, in terms of popularity as well. You can see that Raila is shaken. This is usually his backyard and he gets it very easily. But the amount of campaigning he's had to do, and you could see some support for Ruto. And you know, I wouldn't say that unnecessarily. It's not something I like to hear myself, but you could see some support there. And the reason I say, or we say, it's a battle between Ruto and excuse me, and Raila, why do we not see the president there? He is the head of the party. If this really was a Jubilee Party initiative, we would have seen President Uhuru there campaigning for that seat. But because of the handshake, because of other dynamics at play, he's not going to be there. And by Ruto putting in a Luhya candidate, as I say, it was a stroke of genius, because what he does is he divides the Luhyas and the Luos, and he has been wooing Western. He has been looking for that Luhya vote. If only they could coalesce around one leader. And it looks like they're going to do so, but unfortunately for him, it's going to be under Raila's person, or the guy Raila has chosen, which is Oparanya.
How on earth do you draw the line between a political leader who's just being careful and being politically astute and being scared? How do you define
who are we talking about?
You mentioned that Raila is scared.
Raila, it's shaken him. This is his backyard. He should get this with his eyes closed. He's had to work for it. I think he'll still win, but there'll have been a statement that's made.
When he was MP, he used to do it with his eyes closed.
Absolutely.
Well, I think there's also the element or factor that, you know, even if it's assumed that it is his backyard, he can't just sit down and assume that the status quo will be maintained.
That would be
there's
political
still some
folly.
work. That would be definitely a
folly.
wrong move. There's still some work that has to be done. Even if it is his backyard, you still have to maintain. If you just want to apply that to our world, the greatest companies or corporations.
No, there's some people who didn't have to. Who was the governor who didn't campaign at all? Anyang' Nyong'o? Zero campaign, not a
senator.
No.
Jim Orengo.
Senator, yes. Even Anyang' Nyong'o, when he was senator, didn't really have that much.
Not even a flyer printed.
Senator Jim Orengo for the nominations. I have Samuel calling in from Mombasa. Good morning, Samuel.
Yes, good morning. How is everyone?
Good morning. Very well, thank you.
Good. Now, just a quick one. I don't see why the ODM party leader would want to pick Oparanya to that level, because of a few factors. One, basically, Western has been his big support base.
Absolutely.
I think the last 3 elections. That is in 2007, 2012, 2013. It's largely been his base. And I'll be asking myself, Oparanya was already in the fold. What is this that Oparanya is going to contribute or add to make Raila want to place him in that position?
He's going to neutralize, at the very least, or initially, he's going to neutralize the support that DP has been getting from the likes of Boni Khalwale and so on. And I think given his popularity, given the work he has done in Western, he's spoken of very highly, which is what has changed since, let's say, 2013. Nobody knew how well Oparanya would do with Kakamega. So he's very popular right now within that Western community. So at the very least, he's neutralizing support for Ruto from that sector in the first instance. But for me, I think it's not even bringing something to Raila. It's actually Raila bringing something to him at the moment by endorsing him. I don't see the the Luhya bloc or the Luhya people in Kibra necessarily looking at Oparanya and being influenced by him. I think Raila is even more influential over them than Oparanya. So to me, it's more of a statement by Raila at the moment.
Okay, because the way I would look at it is this. If I have attempted to run for presidency in the past and unsuccessfully so for the last 3-4 times, I think I would look and I'd look at the math and ask myself, what is this small math that I'm missing that is making it impossible for me to cross over? I wouldn't really look at what I've already had in the past. I think I would look at what is it that I can add? Where else do I need to tap? But
you also have to look at what you have. If somebody's eating into it, before you start looking for more, you've got to protect what you've had and what you have. And Ruto is gaining traction in Western. He's been wooing them, giving them a lot of goodies.
The reason I'm saying this is...
Raila is trying to protect that.
In the last attempt, we had Raila twice pick Kalonzo as his running mate. And that... we cannot deny the fact that Kalonzo coming on board, he came with quite a big of lower eastern chunk and brought on board to the Raila side. Now, I'm looking at it this way. If Raila was to do away, for instance, with Kalonzo, and he loses that chunk of lower eastern, which is also not a very small chunk, where does that place him?
But you forget that
Kalonzo in any way...
But Kalonzo is just one person from that place.
From that block.
There are other people he could choose from that particular block.
And Kalonzo's support is waning. Charity Ngilu is taking over that region now.
Mutua is also appearing.
Alfred Mutua is gaining traction.
And then you have the governor of
Kibwana. Yes. So, I mean, you have options.
He doesn't have the block that he used to. It's not what it used to be. But in terms of the Luhya block and you saying that it's of no consequence given that he's been there all along, he also has to protect his turf because Ruto is eating into it. If Ruto is bringing a Luhya candidate, what does that say to the Luhya supporters of
Western?
No, the Luhya supporters of Raila, even in Kibra? Do you understand? Because now, in essence, or it comes across that Raila is fighting the Luhya candidate,
but Jerry,
and it creates a rift.
The question I would ask is, what do the Luhya voters in Kibra think?
Well, we can only assume, which is why politics is all about perception.
We actually don't have to assume. You could actually ask them and they would tell you.
Would they tell you the truth, though? That's another question. My point is,
it
could look like he's going against the Luhyas. And I think that's why I keep saying it was a stroke of genius by Ruto to introduce this. And Raila, to counter that, has brought Oparanya. And that has its consequences in that it also further endorses Oparanya on a national level.
That you may have a point.
I always have a point, City.
In terms of bringing Oparanya to the national stage.
No.
He's the only other big person from Western who he could bring. Who else
could
he bring?
But really, he wouldn't have had to bring him if Ruto's candidate was not Luhya.
Of course,
he wouldn't have had to bring him.
Yes.
So this is why I'm saying Ruto knows exactly what he's doing, and he's wooing the Western vote.
So
big
Ruto
time.
has forced Raila's hand here.
Absolutely, but in doing so, there's a lot more that's unraveled, and he's going to push Oparanya to the fore of leadership.
But Jerry, what you're saying is not quite that. You're saying that Raila is using this issue because Kibra gives you high visibility, that he's using it to give Oparanya even more visibility.
Absolutely, that's an unintended consequence. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of dynamics and layers going on.
But then you have to look at also, if then placed in that position where he was then the center of attention coming out of that particular block, does he have the political wherewithal to lead at that that level? Can he rise?
Absolutely.
Can he rise to that? Because he served as governor
and he'll run.
He served as governor, and the development has actually been pushed through, and that is why he has actually stood out more than normally.
Status in Western.
But, absolutely, but then at this
Western
position but now looking at it nationally, can he hold?
Actually, his reputation positive is growing in Western.
Nationally, then, can he hold the seat?
But unless you try him out before
would never
Oparanya
know.
became
Well, this
governor,
we're trying him out.
had
Pole
people
Pole,
known
he
he could be
started.
governor? No.
Look, at least we're
Before
talking
Body
about
Halone
him.
lost the last election, wanted to be governor. Did we know he would lose? No. So, with these things, unless someone tries, we actually can't know.
City.
Yes.
You know that Wycliffe Oparanya has actually stood on podiums and said, "I'd like to be president."
Yes, I've heard him say it on many occasions.
Have you heard it on many occasions?
Yes.
Have you heard it being repeated by other people that, well, we can also consider Oparanya?
No, I haven't, but that doesn't really matter because
The endorsement at this
should.
point doesn't matter.
no, it doesn't because
should.
utterances by politicians usually is a bargaining statement. It's not that he necessarily wants to be president.
And then how it becomes a bargaining statement is because you see other people actually falling behind him and saying, yes, this is our man. This is our man who can be president.
So yeah, he's testing the waters by the utterances.
Yeah, but he
But
hasn't
also-
gotten any support. He hasn't
No,
gained traction.
but in a competitive arena like politics, where everybody thinks they can be God, you don't expect another God to support another one.
There's no conversation.
He's looking for his own followers.
When you talk about
Absolutely. There's
Gideon
a
Moi,
struggle
for
for the-
example,
for the
Gideon Moi
space.
has never said, "I'd like to be president." He has never. But then we talk about
Gideon
him.
Moi
Other
is in a
people-
different league.
Other people talk about Gideon Moi.
No, but Gideon is in a different league.
Other people are talking about Kivuda Kibwana.
Yes, they are.
Here, then
But
Oparanya's peer.
Look, with politicians, unless you have the sort of oomph and energy that someone like Deputy President Ruto has, where he just propels himself forward with the assistance of some unknown forces at some
wind.
point, okay, when he's wind assisted, most politicians need to be propelled by someone. And until they're propelled, the position doesn't become a debating point.
Right, and
No,
even
just-
unless you're put in that limelight, for example, unless you're elevated to that position, like you said, a lot of things then unravel when you think you actually begin to then dabble with the possibility that this could actually be. But unless that happens, you probably would not think about it. And so maybe moves like this that were deliberate then give you unprecedented results.
And also this Kibra election, it's a brilliant arena. I say it's an encyclopedia for predicting 2022 and seeing where how people will align themselves. Do you see Mudavadi and Ruto getting somewhat closer as a result of this? Because clearly Mudavadi is fallen out with Raila.
You know that
So,
falling out. This is what I
They've
keep
been
telling
together.
you.
No,
Anything can
that
happen.
falling out, I think the falling out is made more so significant
All right.
by bringing Oparanya in.
Okay.
Because I can fall out with UCT. Say we're together
But as long as
for
there's no
conversation's sake,
replacement.
and we fall out.
Together
So long as
going
there's,
where exactly?
let's say we're together, you and I, and we fall out.
In a
So long
place
as
at
there's
a
no
time.
replacement,
Then
there's
there's
a
still a
possibility
chance.
of us making
Let's
making
go.
up.
Roderick,
Of a possibility of us
Good
making
morning.
up.
good morning. How are you?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Roderick. Settle
Okay.
this thing for
I am
us
from-
because you understand Western politics better than the rest of us here.
Bia Maluya from Kakamega.
Okay.
The only thing that will unite the Luhya nation is having a Luhya president.
Oh, that's wishful thinking. I think.
Wait.
Hey.
If there is anything that will unite our community, this perceived that we are fighting against each other, and only that will unite the whole Luhya nation as one is having a Luhya president. But the moment Oparanya becomes a deputy, or any other leader that Raila is trying to elevate, or anybody else trying to elevate as a deputy, or whoever is called Ruto, then I'm telling you the truth, the Bukusu will vote differently, and the people in Kakamega and Mumias will vote separately. Luyas, we are the second largest tribe. And this thing, we have been shortchanged very many times. And
No, you haven't organized yourselves as one voting bloc. It's different.
We have this time. I'm telling you,
This
It
time
will be different.
Roderick,
see an opportunity.
don't let
See an
Jerry fool
opportunity
you.
because
Don't let
Yes,
Jerry
I'm
fool
saying-
you, yes.
what?
I mean, don't let Jerry fool you.
Have you ever organized
Carry
yourselves
on-
to
carry on
coalesce
with your
around one
discussion.
leader?
But we did it with Wamalwa.
But that was the situation was also ripe at the
The
time.
situation was all right.
Yes.
And this time, also the situation is all right. That's why DP is camping in Western, because he knows the Luhya bloc he has to need the Luhya bloc to make it to the presidency, because it's a decided Kikuyu nation.
But
it's very undecided right now. People are pulling in different directions.
You've just said that unless it's a
Unless
president you're going for, you can't coalesce around one leader. So why is Ruto
Let me
even
tell you one
bothering?
thing. Because you know why? We have guns for hire like Khalwale.
Name them, all of them.
There. When you put those guys, I told you, Angalia Sasa, those guys will run there because for money and handouts and whatever. You see, what are they to Kula Ugali State House? Some of us have done to that.
See, State House ni Karen wanaitagwa.
Wanaitanga Karen. You know. So the thing is this: the only way, and I think Raila should not run. Raila should be a kingmaker.
And endorse Oparanya.
Again, and I said no. Not the endorse of Baranya. Okay, maybe only for the presidency.
Yeah.
But there will be a problem with Musalia Mudavadi and other pockets of resistance. There will be some pocket of resistance all over.
Is Musalia, who's more popular, Musalia or Paranya?
Musalia is popular, but he's not doing a good job. Somebody should tell Musalia running around Chavakali town will not give him votes.
Oh, okay.
He's in Chavakali.
Sawa.
Thank you, Rodrigo.
Sorry, in Vihiga. It won't give him votes. Yes, he's doing a good job. He's vocal than the other people in the opposition right now. He's trying to say something that matters the nation. But if he is endorsed by people who have weight like Uhuru Kenyatta and
we lost him.
He will sail through. But right now, I'm telling you for the truth, we have gunfires like Moses Wetangula. I don't trust him. And the other fellow called Halwale who is running in Kakamega all over there. Those guys are guns for hire, and they will do anything to get a chunk of whatever.
How receptive are the people on the ground of these guns for hire? How susceptible are they to their influence? Are they malleable?
No, these guys are going nowhere. Even Halwale is going nowhere. He won't get that seat for the Kakamega governor. He won't get that. Let me tell you one thing. Right now, you cannot predict anything. Wacha BBI anza kutembea na hii BBI, you'll see now the
things will change.
Things will change.
The animal will grow more legs.
People around Ruto wanachapwa viboko. Look at Waititu. People are being put in line. Uhuru Kenyatta is putting his house in line in order. Raila is doing the same in wherever he is. So right now we cannot speculate anything for now. But
tungoja BBI.
Change. BBI ikianza kukampeniwa and Raila is this way, Uhuru is campaigning this way, now the alignment will be there.
Okay.
But the only way is just put a Luhya president or somebody who will be comfortable, neutral to the Kikuyu, to the Luo, and to the Luhya at large.
Mudavadi.
Thank you, Rodrick.
But he's not doing enough.
Thank you, Rodrick.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We're looking at Jerry Thorne's crystal ball, where this morning she said, let's take a look at Wycliffe Oparanya. Well, and you've heard what people have said. Good morning, and thank you for calling in. It's 20 minutes after 8.
9.
After 9.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
87.9 Mombasa, 102.5 Kisumu, 96.0 Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret, in Nyeri 90.9, Malindi 97.7, and of course we are also on our social media platforms, on digital platforms, www.spicefm.co.ke, Spice FM KE on Facebook, where you can also post in your comments and your conversation, and we're picking up some of what you're saying there. And our hashtag on Twitter is hashtag Situation Room. Our Twitter handle, Spice FM KE. We're also, of course, on YouTube, and this is Spice FM KE. Now, let's talk about something that happened in 2017. On Saturday was the anniversary of the repeat election in 2017. And remember what the word vibe then was? It was, we go and vote mapema mapema so that we can give Uhuru Kenyatta a birthday present, and we go and attend Uhuru's the birthday celebration. Of course, the president was celebrating his birthday on the 26th of October. And the vibe around then, being of course pushed by the Jubilee Party, was this is it. This is Kumira Kumira. If we are doubting that the people had actually voted for Uhuru the first time, let us show you that people actually voted for Uhuru. And well, people came out, they voted, and those that did not vote. But we saw that Uhuru Kenyatta was then declared president after that, because of the vote that was conducted on the 26th of October 2017. Since then, we have seen a lot of developments happening in government. Of course, the deputy president and the president working together, but there appears to be a rift between them. They keep insisting that they're working together. We've also seen the handshake between the president and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and now we're waiting for BBI, which is as a result of that handshake in March 2018. Now, a lot of people, because of remembering or commemorating what happened on the 26th of October 2017, this Saturday, many were saying, oh, let's call this government. What was the result of our vote in 2017? People, many of them saying we don't feel like we got what we bargained for. This is not what we voted for. But I think we judge this presidency too harshly sometimes. Let's take a look at what has happened since 2017, since Uhuru Kenyatta actually became president in 2013. Number one, when he came into power, he said, I'd like to promote peace in this country where all communities work as one, all communities stop fighting during elections. The first thing that they achieved with the Deputy President, William Ruto, of course, was bringing the Kikuyu and the Kalenjin together. And of course, in 2017, we had the rift again with the NASA coalition. And with a handshake, now we have cross-border peace with all communities. All communities now thinking as one country. BBI has brought in that conversation of let's work together, let's find out in ways in which we always have constant politicking during and especially in the run-up to elections where we constantly politicking. That's one thing that Uhuru has achieved. Second thing, let's look at infrastructure. SGR. Well, you can all call it whatever you want to call it. Nowhere. Suswa is not nowhere. Suswa is in this republic, and it was designed to go there anyway. It's not that it ended up there because it derailed. No, the train was actually meant to come from Mombasa and go all the way to Suswa and proceed to Uganda, and now it is at Suswa. Well, phase 2B has taken it to Suswa. Yes, that is something. Lake Turkana wind power started a long time ago. It's completed. It's actually transmitting power and bringing it all the way to Suswa again. So Suswa is a big place. So wind power is coming all the way from Turkana. Loyangalani is coming all the way here. If you look at what the government has done, what the Uhuru Kenyatta's presidency has done, what it has achieved, are we judging him too harshly, too soon?
No. But we're not judging him harshly enough. This wind power that you speak of, what has it added to the national grid?
In terms of what, megawatts?
Yeah, in terms of capacity, what percentage? I mean, we have a national grid, and if it has it lowered the tariffs that we pay? Has it lowered the cost of electricity? What is the benefit? What has it done?
Look, before we started having these other alternative sources of power, we only relied on hydro, right? Hydro was being impacted heavily when you didn't have rains. When rivers were drying up, we'd have issues with hydro, and then you bring in thermal generated.
It wasn't that we didn't have rains. Our policy for harvesting rain or making use of it,
it's non-existent.
Yes, and it's not the rain. So carry on, please.
CT.
We get sufficient rain in this country.
Right now we have floods. Right
now we have floods, but then we get to a point where
we get floods every year.
We get to a point where the rain actually does not rain for some time, and with the hydropower generating stations, the dams start running low on water. This is a fact, CT. So yes, it could be because of those other factors. Oh, we cut trees and we don't harvest well enough. The fact is, when it comes to power generation, before we started advancing all these other alternative sources of power, geothermal, and now we have wind and we have solar in some areas, it was not there. Now we have that. Now we have wind coming in, we have geothermal coming in, we've got solar panels in Garissa. There's an entire solar farm in Garissa. There's solar wind power in at Ngong Forest. This is something that's happening. So, what's your question?
You want us to take up an applauding stance, clearly, for what has been done.
No, I'm just saying, let's not always concentrate on the 10%.
Well, I find myself actually asking the question, should we be applauding, or should we just say, look, this is this is what you were elected to do. It's like coming to work every day and someone saying, wow, you did that today. But that is actually what you were called on to do. That's what you.
That's the job.
That's your job.
That's the job you applied for.
Expected of you.
That's
so
exactly
if we applaud you saying you've
That's
done your job, you're getting paid a salary. That's applause enough.
I think on the social pillar, in terms of development, I think that's where I would place my accolade, or that's where I'm impressed, considering how divided the country was. But
Jerry,
from an economic perspective,
for the purpose of this conversation in this room, don't use the word respect and accolade. Just say that's why you acknowledge, you notice.
No,
because
it's actually something I'm impressed by.
Because the next thing would be, that's what he's supposed to have done.
No, he's not supposed to have done that.
Why don't we hear Jerry out? Tell us why you're impressed.
I'm impressed because it's not something he had to do, and it goes against sort of conventional wisdom. It goes against the grain of what the country was feeling and where we thought we would go. For him to be able to bring us together, I'm impressed.
You talk about the handshake.
The handshake, absolutely. Nobody expected that. There's a lot of tension in the country, and it would have been actually very difficult to rule if that tension continued.
So why are you giving him the credit, not Raila?
So for me, we're talking about him. It's him we voted for on that day.
He's the president.
Raila, we can talk about Raila tomorrow. I'll give him a lot of credit.
No, I mean,
I'm happy to do that these days.
What if you had a handshake with Mudavadi?
Same.
Would it have brought about the same peace that we have? No. So we will talk about Raila tomorrow. Today we're talking about the president. Although I am disappointed in some of the sort of debt we find ourselves in as a country. Now, as to whether he had a choice in it or not, in terms of did we have to take more loans so that we can finish some of these mega infrastructure projects, that is probably perhaps the case. But I think that's where I would fault the president in terms of debt, and maybe not communicating, as an office, not communicating enough to the citizenry. We're left in the dark on a lot of matters with the Huduma, with explaining certain initiatives going on in the country, whether that rests on the presidency or interior, which ministry it falls under. I think the buck still ends with State House. Their communication has been wanting, to say the least. So that's my take. But it's still too early to tell. He still has 3 years.
He's had 7 years.
He's still we're talking from since 2013, and sadly, it's been tainted by the perpetual electioneering mode that we've been put into by the deputy president with the rallies and speaking of 2022 politics all the time. That's the sad bit.
So the point I'm raising here this morning is: so yes, there are many things that are going wrong. There are many things that are going right. And if I look at it in my scale, the things that are going right outweigh the things that are going wrong.
Well, we're still running as a country,
yes,
so we're doing all right.
That is number one. It's a big thing. People assume that thing, it's a big thing.
No, David D would have you think, there's a time I thought the country was about to implode.
Well,
the way he used to speak about the economy. But you still have a lot of foreign direct investment coming into the country. We're still seeing development. We're still seeing the economy grow, even if it's not by double digits as we would have hoped. The economy is still growing. There's been talk of unemployment, but we have to take into account our population growth in terms of how fast it's grown. So it becomes quite difficult to balance. And there's new industries that we're trying to open up into in terms of, we're saying to people, you don't have to look for jobs, get into innovation, start business and so on. So it's also a different dynamic in terms of the work environment, automation and so on. There's fewer jobs as a result. So it's been a tough one. He's tried to fight corruption, of course, under a new dispensation or under a new constitution where he doesn't have the powers that former presidents have. And we're used to, roadside decrees and people being thrown into jail at his whim. That's not the case. We're now upholding democracy as it's known. So there's the separation of powers. He doesn't have the powers he used to have. Not only was power decentralized, but there was a lot of limits that were put on the president's powers. So we can't expect too much. When he said mnataka nifanye nini, I really got it, because what he was saying is I can't send people to jail. That's what you guys you want. You're baying for blood. You want these corrupt figures to be sent to jail.
No.
Absolutely.
There are systems in place, and what he's trying to use now is that he's working with the system. You understand the system, work the system, and let the system work for you and with you. And that's what he's doing now. But you can't just say that, put my hands up and say there's nothing I can do.
No, there is nothing he could do. You know what? You've got to go. In a democracy, it's what you call institutionalized leadership, not personalized. What Magafuli is doing is personalized leadership, and he will chase away investors because people get scared of the environment. I can do something, this guy doesn't like me and he kicks me out. What you want is structures in place, and Uhuru has gone very far in strengthening these institutions, where we're beginning to have trust and confidence in the system. Can you imagine if you were sending or trying to, he wouldn't be able to, not per the constitution and the democracy and separation of powers we have, but if he was trying to send people to jail at his whim, That is very dangerous. And what message
are you suggesting that
Magufuli is doing that? Yes.
Investors do not like people who personalize leadership like Magufuli?
They do not. Investors are very scared.
They love them.
No, they don't. A serious investor will look at the landscape. They'll look at the terrain, the political landscape. Okay. They'll look at the law. Do you guys follow the law? If I come here and I fall foul with the law, will we follow a fair trial, or are you as president going to kick me out? Are you as president going to grab my assets? Before a company invests, so say Toyota decides to come and open a plant here, they will look at a very many things, one of them being the political stability. Now, if it's personalized leadership, political stability is not as strong as institutionalized leadership. Secondly, they can just be kicked out of the country for doing one or two things wrong or leaning one way politically or another. You'll find you chase away investors with personalized leadership. Trust me, it is one of the consequences.
Not necessarily. That argument is a beautiful Western construct.
It's not a Western contract. It is
look, how have world-renowned dictators held on to power and had businesses opening in those very countries?
You also have investors who would look and say, well, this is able to operate within certain lines of discipline, and because of that we want to come and put our money in here because we are sure that they're going to follow certain guidelines, they're going to follow certain rules,
that is
and
what
actually get the job done.
That's what companies want. They don't want personalized leadership. It's scary. It's unstable. They want strong institutions.
So we have institutions,
which is what the president has done.
The president has power to actually work with these institutions, and that's what he's done. He's strengthened the institutions. He's worked with the institutions. So it's not that he can do nothing about corruption. And what he has done is working with the institutions.
In that I have done what I can within my limited
that time
powers.
He hadn't done it yet.
And
now he has.
And I'm telling you,
he has.
And he has done a lot.
In terms of the fight against corruption.
It's 28 minutes to 10 o'clock.
We're talking about investment. Where have you brought in corruption?
Spice and everything nice. All right.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, a lot of traffic along Mombasa Road inbound. And we've had that come up just after the General Motors section of the road heading down out towards the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. It is not moving, unfortunately. It's I guess everybody thought that there was no traffic and everyone decided to leave at the same time, but that is what we see there. All right, coming off of Langata Road, quite a lot of traffic as well. Could be the same situation, we don't know. But yes, Mombasa Road and Langata Road today are the problem areas that we see. Everything else more or less moving a little bit better than usual, getting us to around about 10 o'clock this morning. We'll be just fine. You'll get there eventually. It's traffic, we have to deal with it, but that's the case. 0719-012-600. Should you see anything out of the ordinary that we can share, let us know.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Kenya's biggest conversation every morning, every weekday morning between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. My name is Eric Latif. We have Ndu Oko, Jerry Thorne, and C.T. Muga. We're basically taking a scorecard of President Uhuru Kenyatta's term so far. This is second term so far. Of course, we can't forget that he had a first term. So there's some project that he started in the first term that he's completing in the second term. And some of the things that we're looking at are what he has achieved and maybe what he hasn't done so well. And my contention this morning is, yes, there are many things that the president hasn't done. Yeah, he hasn't done well. He hasn't done them yet. But if we put them alongside what he has been able to achieve so far, the good outweighs the bad. Are you looking at me like that, City? You disagree? So yes, City Muga says we haven't criticized the president enough.
No, we haven't. When I say enough, I'm not saying we haven't shouted at the president and we haven't told him what a useless leader he is. That's not what I'm saying. If you want to criticize the president enough, you need to actually construct it so that it is understood what you feel could have been done and the manner in which it could have been done and what it is that they haven't done. But a lot of our criticism is you haven't done it and that's it. And that's obvious. And there could be reasons why it hasn't been done. Now, the criticism I'm talking about goes beyond just pointing fingers. You don't just say we can see it hasn't been done. We've understood. But you say, Mr. President, or your government said they were going to do A, B, C, D, and what we've seen you trying and which has failed is this. Yet there were these options. You may have thought of them, but we've seen them work, and we're not going to take you to another country. We are going to take you to just across the border here, 1 hour's flight or half an hour's flight, one of these countries around us, and we've seen this thing work. That's what I'm saying. Or, why are we focusing? Hydroelectric, we keep saying that water is a problem, and yet hydroelectric power constitutes 49.7% of what we utilize, and yet we have wind. This wind here, free. Sun, free. You don't have to pay for it. All you need to do is harness it and its energy. Okay? Geothermal, it exists. No, these are not things we're looking for. They exist.
Geothermal constitutes about 60%.
Where? Are you saying the power we use in this country, that geothermal constitutes 60% of
the power that we use, that we currently consume?
I want you to tell me that one.
Geothermal is the biggest percentage. I may get the percentages wrong, but geothermal right now is the biggest percentage of our energy mix.
Get it right and then tell me.
So it's the biggest percentage of our energy mix.
President. Let's talk about what he's done right and what he's done wrong.
Eric, ignore Jerry. Let's have a discussion.
No. Because we could go down the road.
No,
we could go down the road.
Jerry's steering the discussion to something she wants to discuss.
No, but we're discussing the president.
But that's what I'm doing. If we have energy that is available in huge quantities, what Eric has said, he has newer statistics than I have, and I want to listen to his, because if what he's saying is true, then the statement that he has made, I will have to revise my statement and say that indeed the president has done something. So
because of this geothermal statistic, that will be the only thing. While he's looking up those statistics, what else has the president done?
I focus on what he hasn't done. That's what I focus on. The reason why I'm focusing on this geothermal, energy alone, if we bring down the cost of energy or power in this country,
the Big Four agenda could be sorted out.
Remember when I told you my focus would have been was manufacturing, and I give you the reason why. Manufacturing needs power. If we can bring this to the point where it is genuinely cheap and cheaper than all our neighbors, the development Jerry keeps talking about is sorted. It is sorted. Even Ugandans will come and produce things in Kenya because it is cheaper.
Are you happy with the sectors, the areas he chose to focus on in the Big Four?
Which ones?
Housing, manufacturing, food security.
What has happiness got to do with it?
Housing. Or are you happy?
No.
Are you satisfied?
No, other things make me happy. Not presidential.
It's a figure of speech.
It's not presidential pronouncement.
I was inviting you to critique or criticize.
Are you content?
No. This also isn't an issue of
what
contentment.
Are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts are he has focused on 4 areas that could actually revolutionize the thinking of our people and the livelihood of our people. Because if you have an area that helps create employment, helps ensure that we can do things locally, internally, that would help with the Kenyan self-image of themselves, meaning these are things that we can do. Forget these long stories of buy Kenya, build Kenya, those slogans which mean very little. But it'll actually be seen and it'll something you'll be doing. If you can then ensure that there's affordable housing for people, it may sound simple, it may sound strange, but what you're doing is you're putting ownership and property and wealth in people's hands. Those are things you must applaud. So I won't even go into the realm of those are things he ought to do. Forget that argument. Many people have things that they don't do. Even parents don't parent well. So we're not going to go and blame the president for making promises to almost 50 million people. So if he tries to do these things for the 50 million people, then in my mind he'll be a great president. That hasn't happened yet. So greatness is still awaiting him.
And looking at the time that is, obviously there's some things that we can't wait to predict or that we shouldn't predict in time. But do we see that there would be that legacy that he would have left behind in terms of actually, completing some of these things that we said are necessary for the running of the country, as opposed to, yes, there were promises that were made. And, we also talked about development that having been carried out by the next regime. And it's hard to see that development projects will be completed by one presidency. And sometimes we see, development projects that were started in the Kibaki era that have still not been completed. Isn't that something that we should also say, look, he's given it a good start and would be completed in time, per se?
These projects that have not been completed are like which ones, for instance?
That what? That was started.
No, I'm saying I'm
yes.
saying if there were projects that had not been completed in the Kibaki regime, for example, you would say would be an indicator of development that something is actually going on. It is developing and continuing. Do we look at it in the same way and say with Uhuru Kenyatta's presidency as well?
There's some that he has started that
would be
should-
things that he has begun that would not realistically be completed within that time.
But that's the
and that would
point.
have to carry on to another
A
presidency.
10-year presidency cannot complete any major project. You can even. How long do you think it takes to design it, to plan it, to get funding? Do you know for how long we've been talking about the Likoni Bridge? It's decades. When was funding actually secured and firmed? What, 2-3 years ago? Yes. So these things take time. That Njeri has said on many occasions, and she's right. The president has continued the infrastructure development, and that has been fantastic. You have to look at it, and yet, do you know when it started? When the
A while
Kibaki,
back.
this whole regeneration we see is when the Kibaki government came into power. The blueprint for the entire country. There's no way a 10-year term would actually see that completed. Even Uhuru's term may not finish it. But the other projects, they don't need to take that long. This is where the criticism now comes and says, this doesn't have to take this long, really.
It's going for far too long.
Yes. But the thing that they've introduced, and this has brought a lot of criticism, this we didn't ask them to do. Magical tricks of whole dams disappearing. Wonderful trick. And what augments it further is even money disappears in the process.
It's a tricky one, but because again, under the new constitution, it was a partnership, wasn't it? Almost, a coalition government in essence before the Jubilee Party was formed. So what you have is one faction, doing certain things and what they want, and this is not there's no provisions to sack your deputy. Let's say if it's him I'm talking about.
Zero. It's a presidency.
Yeah,
it's like sacking yourself.
So it becomes quite difficult actually to sort of.
Why do these things always land on the deputy's lap? Or why is it him who's always doing things?
Who was it that said it wasn't 21 billion? It was just 7 billion. He seems to know quite a bit about those dams.
Yes, but it's the deputy president.
Who okayed the project?
Yes, actually, who okayed it? Yes.
It was okayed at the highest level.
It's not him.
Yeah, at cabinet level. So cabinet, who's the head of the cabinet?
No,
who chairs the cabinet?
We know that the cabinet was also shared.
So who cancelled the project the other day?
Yes.
In the coalition.
So which leads the question saying, so who actually gave permission in the first place? I'm simply saying this. There are things that erode confidence, and it brings the two elements I discussed some times back. Mistrust, which then leads to distrust. Distrust is where now there is no faith, absolutely gone, finished. Mistrust is when there's doubt. Now, when people are in that state of mind, even good things will not look good because the lenses they're wearing are really very tinted. And we're saying if the tint is cleared, then it is easy to see, okay. Now, has the president tried? My personal view, he has.
In what areas? Where do you? What
no,
informs
it's not even in the area. I'm not even faulting him. I'm saying we've never had a president in this country who has had to grapple with what this president has had to. One, there's no president who's had the sort of population this man has and the level of education he has, and against a backdrop of the issues he had at The Hague, just for starters there. No one has ever had those problems. All our presidents...
with the new constitution and the limited powers, the decentralization of powers, and the continuous sort of electioneering, not just to the DP, but also within counties and how that has destabilized the country.
I do want our listeners to understand that I've allowed my assistant Njeri to continue the discussion and to carry forth the thoughts that I was going to
delegated and now you're sitting back.
You missed a few things. I had to add that. It was very important.
It isn't the interruption.
Constitution it limits
Please,
a lot of
Njeri, tell them about the
powers.
constitution.
So there's a new constitution coming into play. There was a Hague case hanging over him. What else?
Now Eric is assisting.
My listeners, I want to apologize for misinforming you. I actually do have two assistants.
What else, City? Let's move on. Well, we're talking about the president's term so far, since we gave him the Kumira, the Thuraku votes in October 2017. And why are people really complaining about what the president has achieved or not? And let's look at what he has achieved, what he hasn't achieved. Let's give him a scorecard. 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. The phone lines are now open. Good morning. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. It's 9:45.
Sugar and spice,
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
As I was saying,
this president has had to
yes,
grapple
as
with.
I was saying, and at the point where we've queued in, please just chime in and continue with the discussion. He inherited some monkeys. The person who first broke a promise to a political partner was Kibaki. They agreed that Raila would become prime minister.
Right.
They're the ones now. Because Kibaki was Kikuyu, Uhuru is Kikuyu, he inherited that monkey. It wasn't his monkey. It's not him who broke that first promise. Now, that amount of baggage. Now, this is not mistrust. This is mistrust, not distrust. Okay? He's had to work through it. Then we had 2007 that happened, again on Kibaki's watch, not Uhuru's. He had to fight that battle and bring the very people who are considered his nemesis onto the table. It is a serious feat. It is
even
a really,
get people to sit in the same space and have a conversation about this.
So we're not seeing eye to eye. It was a serious feat, but it was done. Now, these are not things that have been done before. These are not things that other presidents have faced. It's just a reality. Now, when you throw in the handshake, you have to look at this man again and say, we have perhaps misjudged this man. There are things that we're not focusing, or perhaps his communication team isn't doing a job, or maybe there are people who are in the communication team who are no longer there. So a good job isn't being done as it should be.
Maybe.
But that is the reality of the situation. So it's against that background that I sometimes point fingers at the president and say this one isn't actually quite working. But it's against that backdrop. I do understand. But having understood that, there are all these 50 million people who
are still looking at you.
Yep.
Waiting.
It's unfortunate.
What could he have done differently, CT, in your eyes?
For what? In what area specifically?
The last, where you feel there's things he hasn't done. You haven't named all of them.
He has let certain things just run away and go from bad to worse, to worst and to worstest. Things that shouldn't. And
E.g.,
that's
for instance.
Well, I mean, if I can chime in there. If you, now that
there was a slot that was left.
I can just
fit in.
Take it in. We talk here constantly about the different ministries that we see having failed at their jobs. Examples abound, where we look at agriculture, where food prices have been the highest in Kenya ever, and people have been the most hungry in Kenya in 2019. Those are statistics that have come from within the country. If we look at the education sector and what we've been seeing across board, okay, yes, there's the implementation of new curriculum and things like that have been done under his watch, but at the same time, a sector that is still failing in terms of its implementation. And those are just two examples that we can give across the board that affect people. Look at the health sector. We have now, it's not him directly, but the people that have been appointed under him who are not doing their job, and then the inability to bring them to book to get their job done.
Yes,
exactly.
by him,
to get them to do their job, or vacate the position and put somebody else who can do the job. And those are things that we are seeing. They've been appointed by him. They're not carrying the day. Move them. And we've seen failure in that.
So he's taking too long to take action.
Yes, absolutely. But he's allowing people who represent his government do crazy things.
To do crazy things, and they taint him. They taint his image, and we blame him because those are direct appointments of him.
Eric consider when he said, okay, these dams, the disappearing act was all good and well, but now let's make it disappear altogether. Okay? No dam. Cancel.
Forget dam.
Forget dam.
Forget the money that has gone.
Damn it.
Pun intended. So, indeed, there was a lot of noise. You know, damn this, we shouldn't. But the rest of the country said, good. Now, there's a gentleman whose name keeps coming up. It comes up for the wrong reasons. It's either maize or more maize and then some more maize.
Agriculture.
Yes. Now, his name is coming up with the so-called rebels within central Kenya. And people ask him, but the sort of stance this guy keeps pulling, why is this guy still working? Now, there may be reasons that we don't understand, but you see, from our perspective, people who are that way inclined, before we determine whether they're right or wrong, let them step aside.
Thank you.
As we continue to look at these things. Now, those are the things that build the mistrust. So it isn't him. Uhuru has done this. No. It's his government.
Uhuru has failed to do this about so and so.
Yes, and has failed to rein in so and so, has failed to ensure, because in failing to rein them, he's not protecting the citizenry, the people who actually made him their president. Whether I voted for him or not, it doesn't matter. He's my president.
And he's also failing to protect himself and his image.
Yes.
And any kind of legacy that he could leave behind.
He's damaging his own legacy.
Damaging his own legacy. Because that is what people will remember. Whether we like it or not, we will remember the negative over the positive. And the things that were not done, or actions that were not taken, or things that were not put in place when we saw a situation was getting to zero, And that's what unfortunately will be remembered. So it's not him, it's the people around him.
About national debt.
And yet, if you look, but that's one of the problems. But let me explain. The national debt against his background. Of all the presidents we've had, this man has one of the highest likability factors.
Absolutely.
He has, and he's demystified the presidency.
Yes, and he is, apart from not pulling his weight where he should, he's not taking advantage of strengths that he has.
Very mildly there, he's not pulling his weight. This is the president.
Yes. Okay. And this is a talk show.
We're talking about
it. So I'm talking.
Does he have the powers to do something about
it?
Yes,
right.
He does.
Yes, he does.
So it's within his...
That's what I'm saying. He has a natural capacity that is magnetic. He doesn't use it enough.
Mm-hmm.
There are things
what I mean, you're saying that he hasn't been able to rein in some of the corruption that we're seeing and some of sort of the mischief that we're seeing in some government quarters. Does he have the power to rein it in?
He does. Does he have the power to cancel he does.
Something very simple as appointments.
He does.
Something very simple as he appoints. He can
fire.
There you go.
Jerry, what I'm saying is
clear.
Why I brought in the likability factor. When you have the likability factor, people give you leeway. You can get away with things. You can say things. You can do things that other people say, why? They say, no. You just give Uhuru a break.
Come on.
What do you mean? He's trying. He's helping us. When you're not liked, even good things, people say, that is not that good. No. Could have done better. That's the view they take.
If it were me.
Yes. No. In fact, I can do this job better. And that's a guy who wasn't even class prefect in primary school.
And do you think it becomes problematic, this notion of a presidency, where you're sort of handcuffed to another individual? You're joined at the hip, even when it comes to your legacy.
The handcuff is not a bad thing. It brings in accountability. Now, the likability factor means you're a nice person. Being nice also has its drawbacks. You don't want to call people out because they're your buddies. And you watch Toki Dog, you're telling him,
you, where?
I'm going to make some part of your anatomy into a stool very soon. That sort
but
of
there's
thing.
nothing you can do as the president.
Yes, there's a lot you can do.
With regards to the deputy president, what can you do?
You can orchestrate impeachment.
He can. No.
Which is also a reflection. It's a reflection on your presidency.
It's terrible.
The likability factor gives the guy a buy. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Okay? All right? Because the unlikability factor works against the deputy president. I mean, I hear things being said until I ask, no, you
what
guys,
did this guy do?
Is he omnipresent, for heaven's sake? I mean,
can't be everywhere at the same time. And he can't be the one who's taking the fault for everything that happens negatively in this country.
No. That's
right?
No, he is the one.
But true, there are certain
Next,
things.
we're going to be told there's a lamp that he hides in as a genie when you don't see him. Then if you rub it, he comes out.
He too plays with the crystal ball.
No.
However, there are certain things that he has that are inherently his that he doesn't use to his advantage, and that's clear that he could use. And you see him actually using them on certain occasions when he's having a conversation for the national eye, for the national focus, and you can see that he has this. He can do it, but he doesn't let it expend it on a level where it affects the citizenry, and those are the people who are going to hold him accountable. These are the people who are going to construct the narrative for which he will be remembered or forgotten by.
Let me tell you, these natural qualities people have, they often make the big difference. Uhuru's father was he was autocratic to a T, okay? But there are many quarters in which he was liked. But part of it was he was Mzee. The president, not who came after him, was also very well liked in many quarters, genuinely liked. And the likability factor was even greater when he stopped being president. The person who you cannot put the likability factor or juxtapose the likability factor with was Kibaki.
Kibaki was also
But he was
liked,
a very effective president.
Absolutely. Said very little.
Extremely effective president. You see, so all I'm saying is...
Was Kibaki not liked?
No, on the likability factor, you didn't think of Kibaki in terms of you thought of Kibaki in terms of efficiency.
Growth,
you talk of it in terms of understanding how to run a country, how to make things right, bring in systems. Not likability.
Right.
But people with the likability factor have more oomph than such a person. They can get things done that ordinarily people would not get done, because they'll tell you, say, if so and so is saying it, it is okay.
So you feel he's not fully exploiting or capitalizing on it?
I am saying not capitalizing on it at all. Not his trying at all. Because if he was, he could do things that other presidents before him have not even been able to do.
Do you need the likability factor as the president to get things done?
The buy-in by people, I think.
said the likability factor is a tool that when you have it, it will help you.
It will help you.
To get you into elections and re-elected, but once you're president, surely
pushing
you can
agendas, you still need
pushing
it.
agendas, influence.
Telling people.
It's clear.
You go and stand somewhere and say, this is what I want to do. I'd like us to stop politicking. And people really rally behind
the
you.
Fact
And they
that
say,
people
yes,
like
let's
you,
not
the fact that people like you plays a role, definitely.
It plays a massive,
yes, it does.
massive role. Let me give you an example.
Or not like you in this case.
Or not like, but it works both ways.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you say the Right Honorable Raila Odinga has a likability factor?
Oh,
he does.
Absolutely, he does.
Yes. So, when he says things, do people follow? Yes. What? They like him and they feel okay. So he has said.
That's why he can make statements like he did yesterday. Even if you're not going to vote, if you're not going to vote for a cause, vote for me.
Yes.
And he also, you see, he realizes that people like him. He knows that, and he's using it to his advantage in that case.
When you have an entire group of people telling you that this constitution, we're not going to read it because Baba has read it.
He has read it, and we're fine.
And we're okay. What do you think you're being told? The likability factor does play a big role. And Eric, before you say anything, it's not a dead cat.
I saw you trying to throw it in here. I saw you trying to throw it.
Yes, and I saw you seeing.
Let's wind up with the issue of debt, because one of the things that, of course, people will talk about this government is the debt. So we're even raising the debt ceiling. So we've gone beyond what is conventionally accepted as a 50%. We're even saying let's remove percentages. Let's go into figures and say 9 trillion.
Eric, if we didn't gear money that we borrow and money that is meant for development towards election expenses and other spurious expenses that cannot stand, not even close scrutiny, just a little daylight, believe me, there's something we can't pull away from. The amount of money that has been borrowed, if it honestly went to what it was intended, even if the long-term projects, they would be very visible changes. It's the money, the borrowing isn't the issue. It's not even the debt. It's the money is put to.
And the conversation continues.
Eric, but it must.
The conversation must continue.
Yes.
Jerry. Your conversation continues point.
Parting shot
yes.
on the president? I think there's still 3 years to go. We've done very well in terms of the social pillar and ensuring there's an element of inclusivity with what we're seeing with BBI, listening to the people. Let's wait and see what happens with the referendum. I think the social pillar will be your legacy.
There's a little bit of time to cement whether that would be positive or negative, especially for the president and the work that he does. And also hoping that he does realize that the people around him are actually the ones who help to build whatever legacy that he would or would not have. And yes, we do need to keep talking so that we can start thinking differently too. Indeed,
the conversation continues. Join us again tomorrow morning between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. when the Situation Room returns. Between now and 3 o'clock, you're going to be listening to uninterrupted music, sugar and spice and everything nice. That is Spice Soul. Good